Should we begin with biases in this episode, which we have? We'll have
I
different
mean,
biases, right? Okay,
we
so I think
do.
before we start, should I don't know if I'll put this in the episode or not. This is the first time I suppose Chris is introducing our episode in some ways. So I suppose a round of applause in some senses for him. This topic is pretty much initiated entirely by him. We didn't talk about challenges actually, weirdly enough. We didn't do an episode on challenges, even though I think we discussed it like in those live streams, like in a broken
Hmm.
way, not in a sort of. We didn't play the whole game. We played like individual sets. Let's just say that. Sorry, I had to get this. This is like sprinkled throughout this episode will be very lame tennis puns. So bear with that. That is my sole contribution to this episode. But yeah, Chris, do you want to introduce it or introduce a start us up with this episode?
जादू मंतर जादू मंतर जादू मंतर You are going into the future.
You talking to me?
They always be the closing.
என் பேர் மாணிக்கம் எனக்கு இன்னொரு பேர் இருக்கு
Talking to me?
Queen is dead.
Hello, and welcome to this episode where this is the first, but hopefully not the last time that I'm going to be doing this introduction
You
for
learn my
this
job, I'll nicely
podcast.
retire. Don't worry.
मत करो सर, हमसे नहीं हैंडल होगा. You do
No,
the
no,
Lord's work
you
only.
moderate the tehelka which we have. No, next time. I mean,
On the next week.
oh God, we have a live stream actually. Yeah, the good way to start with a plug, I suppose. We have planned a live stream, so that will be interesting considering we'll be talking a lot about Nosferatu. Of course, we are going to be talking about Nosferatu, because how
I
else?
was the one who was told not to bitch about it, and you're the one who brings it
No,
up,
I'm
huh?
just saying, I'm not bitching about it. I'm saying that we will end up discussing it somehow because it's also nominated for a bunch of Oscars. So, all that. And then Oscar nominations in general. And there is no way Chris will not mention a movie which has been nominated the most in today's episode. There
Not
is,
one, but two.
oh, two. Well, I've not seen the second one, so I'm counting the one which is egregious to all and everyone who is not a white Oscar voting member or Cannes jury member, apparently. So,
There's this
it's
whole conspiracy theory that I 100% believe in, that Netflix essentially convinced Greta Gerwig to let that film win at Cannes so that they would allow her to release Narnia theatrically.
oh, okay,
लाइक
okay,
उन दोनों
okay.
के बीच में collusion चल रहा है.
Well, that explains her angle. I mean, Oscars are useless, so that also explains it from their angle. So, anyways, if you sorry, just no, I'm not taking over this. Chris will begin the episode introduction after this. No, I was saying that if you are familiar with us, you know how cynical we are in general, and how cynical we are in general about Oscars because we've covered them for 2 years, I think, on Quid now, and every year you essentially end up getting episodes in which there's bitching about them. There's really very little room for sympathy in terms of what all they choose to showcase and represent and everything. I don't think this year we're gonna do like a comprehensive like the last year we did like a bunching of different movies and then talking about them. Too much effort. Also, a lot of the movies are garbage. So no, I mean we don't like them. Sorry. So they're probably not garbage. We are garbage. We don't like them. Okay, fine. Just to caveat whatever criticisms, if any, come our
I'm
way
going to be
for
the
this.
Amartya here and say they are garbage. Like you can do
Okay.
all the
I mean, there are some which are
the
good,
apologia
which
you
the
want.
I think the good ones we already either have recorded the episodes or we just don't have the copies of the films in general anywhere.
Hmm.
So for good quote unquote good ones, for example, The Brutalist, is not liked by Hemant. So, I'm just saying we have different varying opinions on all this, but you will eventually get the whole of Feb and March essentially as like, a summation of 2024 in many ways. I think this is before we do the Lynch dive, which I'm really excited about. But before that, we have to, trudge through the muck of Academy Awards and their calamitous decisions. But, anyways, we can first talk about someone else's calamitous decisions, I suppose, or not.
So,
Yes, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, so today we are going to be discussing the work of Italian filmmaker Luca Guadagnino, who Dhruv and I have extremely differing, I mean, in some ways, differing opinions on.
Yeah.
Let's not say extremely, but yeah. So what we're going to be doing today is talking about his two most, as we said, controversial queer romances, which is Call Me by Your Name 2017 and Queer 2024. I'm
Which
going
make
to
a
count it as
really good double
2025.
bill.
They
Okay.
do. I'm going to count it as 2025 because I don't want it to be the same year as Emilia Perez.
Hello, very nice to meet you. I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see.
Just I don't need that
okay, so you
kind
just
of
want to
brain
like
rot in my
erase
life.
it. So that's mention number one, by the way, of the film, which I said, which will be mentioned anyways. Yeah.
So that is it's a 2025 release for me. I don't care
Okay.
what any other numbers
So
say,
you are
but
doing the Oscars in your own head, like, or the awards in your own head, essentially. Imaginary
I am.
awards where you make up where queer gets nominated for like a lot of stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Challenges also. Yeah, I'm
Oh
heartbroken
yeah,
that
actually,
Reznor
challenges.
and
I mean,
Ross
see,
didn't get.
I'm not the biggest challengers fans, but some of the I was like best editing for Emilia Perez over challengers,
And
uh,
cinematography. I'm
and
sorry,
cinemat-
Sayamo Mukdipram.
cinematography, editing, and I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of the music, but then they nominated Emilia Perez ka music, which is a travesty.
Two
So
songs.
you know, yeah, I mean, yeah, whatever. Yeah, challenges shutout is actually a bit surprising. I think it goes back again to the whole thing where if you release your film in April, May, you're pretty lucky if it sort of, has a say in the award season after. Dune has it because it made a lot of money also. I mean, challenges made money, but it's still a
No, but I
mid-budget
also think
film.
it is the Emilia Perez Wicked thing where they have essentially taken two spots in almost every category out
Sure.
of any other films that could be nominated.
Hmm.
And both, again, I have a lot of takes, especially since we're talking about queer films and the death
Yeah.
of gay
I
culture
mean, we are
and
not
all of
just
those things.
bringing this out of like, because we have nothing to say about Luca Guadagnino's work. It's related. It's not just dumping on stuff for the sake of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like when you have got two excellent queer films that are doing very different. In my again
I
my
was about to
humble
say, yeah,
opinion,
okay, yeah.
I will caveat it, don't worry. In
Okay.
my personal opinion,
Yeah.
not to do with Dhruv's, I think when you've got two, but you have to agree that compared to Wicked and Emilia
I've not
Perez,
seen Wicked,
they
so I
are
can't say anything. But Emilia Perez,
okay.
I
Let's
have
say
seen.
Wicked.
Emilia Perez is a disaster. So I think both of them are unqualified, like, without any doubt, better films than Emilia Perez. Or even a couple of
I
other
don't think it.
nonsense. What else is nominated? I forgot. I've already forgotten. It's that memorable, I suppose. Anyways, go ahead. Go ahead.
So yeah, so let's just move on from all the bantering for now. But
Yes.
what for this discussion, what I was thinking is we'll start with talking about Guadagnino a bit in general,
Yeah.
our thoughts on his filmmaking. I think both. Have you seen any of his work apart from his English language features?
No, I had down. So I was like, every time we are recording an episode, I always think I always aim for watching everything. So it's basically like, let's watch the entire Desire trilogy made by Luca Guadagnino. And the Desire trilogy consists of one Italian film, which is I Am Love, which I really want to watch because Tilda Swinton's in it. And also features heavily around food, apparently. So I'm like, good two things which good combination, let's just say that. The second so second part of the trilogy is Call Me by Your Name, and third is your favorite, A Bigger Splash. So I had seen A Bigger Splash and Call Me by Your Name before, but I had like a hazy memory of them. Call Me by Your Name, I knew I was going to rewatch for the episode in any case. So like, let me try and watch I Am Love again because I like Tilda Swinton a lot. I didn't watch it, of course. And I didn't get to rewatch A Bigger Splash also, which also has Tilda Swinton, a great Tilda Swinton from whatever my memory is of that film. So yeah, like I had planned all this, but then eventually did end up just seeing Call Me by Your Name and Queer, and so I don't know. I'm very unfocused in my thoughts about Luca Guadagnino as a filmmaker. I think he reminds me his. So when I was watching Queer, I think, and this is not talking just about Queer, but in general about his filmmaking. I was thinking, like, his sensibility is really something, or really one, which I should be clicking with a lot, because his films are so sort of sensual. They're supposed to be sensual, like very very sensual, like they're about glances, touches, and sort of expressing feelings which are between characters, which are sort of expressed more through looks than through words at many times. His regular working DP is Sayambu Muktiprom, who is one of the best cinematographers for me because he works with Apichatpong Veerasathakul, who is, I think, one of the best filmmakers working in the world or right now in the present. So so yeah, like there's a lot of things in his films which I think should click for me, but there's always like a barrier. Like to me it's like almost kind of poetic, reaching out for something in something like Queer, but not being able to feel the sensation which you're meant to feel. There are, of course, moments in his films which are very moving. Call Me by Your Name, I think, is one which has plenty of them. And Queer also has even there's again a lot of moments in a lot of his films which I click with, but I still just don't feel like I get his work. Like I just don't get the emotional reaction that people get out of his work. Someone I had read compared him also to Claire Denis in terms of sensuality, and I was like, it's an interesting comparison. I was just like, maybe Guadagnino is maybe too tied up with narrative, with mainstream cinema in some sensibilities for me to click with his style. Like like a lot of times, if someone makes a comparison between Claire Denis, and we've talked in depth about her, um, when we're talking about her, it's like her filmmaking morphs and the filmmaking becomes a feeling. Like to me, it's like putting an injection into your veins. Like that's her films for me. Like the feeling directly gets, it goes first actually to feeling, and then you sort of come to realize whatever else is going. I think with Guadagnino, I feel I'm on the outside, at least personally. So I can very much admire his craft and admire him as a filmmaker, admire what the subjects he's tackling, admire. This is all excluding Bones and All, by the way, which is a terrible film. But like no,
Which
like
I
it's
can't
genuinely bad. Like I think it's a badly made film also from him. So that and Suspiria I never clicked with, but someone in a class I was in was talking about it, and I was like persuaded by that to rewatch it. So again, curious. But yeah, like I think I'm waiting to click with his work, I think, still. And I thought Queer might be the one because it is quote unquote the loosest of all of his works in general. I think because of the source material also. And even in terms of I think it bombed at the box office like badly because it doesn't have commercial appeal. It's not a, commercial movie like I think his other works challenges it quite well. Bones and all also did decently well, even though it's like a bad vampire movie. But yeah, I think you have very much the opposite reaction to what I have. So I think it's better for you to step in here and talk about his work as opposed to me, because I think my reactions to his films. So I'll essentially my standard role. I'll be the spoil sport for this episode also. So it's okay.
No, I was telling you earlier also, my love for Guadagnino's films are just so much that you even if you wanted to, you cannot be a spoilsport when I talk about
Okay.
his work, just
Yeah,
because
and I think that's
um
important to also mention that I don't think I've disliked any of his work apart from Bones and all. I was scared that if he's going down the Bones and all track, I'd be like worried because I really don't like that film. But apart from that, I've always like looked forward to whatever he's making and whatever he's coming out with. So, I mean, he's coming out with a lot. He has like 5, 6 upcoming projects listed. So I'm like, he's making his money.
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, so when I talk about Guadagnino, and I was mentioning this, there's two perspectives from which I want to talk. One is I think he's a really interesting film, like you said, very interesting filmmaker. I think he's got some fascinating sensibility, stuff that really works for me. Second is that I just have a deeply personal connection with his work, be that how I was introduced to it. We spoke about in the very first time we recorded together about how Call Me by Your Name was such a important film for me in
Yeah.
my personal life, and
Yeah.
it came, and same with Queer. Both of these came at very important moments in my life.
Sure.
And I think about this all the time because I'm fascinated personally by your love of queer cinema, because I know how a lot of, and I don't like drawing these generalizations, but a lot of cishet men who are very deeply uncomfortable with what queer cinema says and does. And to see how, like, the fact that you recommended something like Querelle to me and you love it so much is fascinating to me in a very interesting way. And while I get that these films can have universal emotions and all of those things, I feel like to a certain extent there is a level to which Guadagnino's films relate to someone who have been through those very particular experiences.
Sure.
That I think it
No,
I
go
think
ahead.
it
Sorry.
makes a little bit of a difference where, films have that power that you can resonate with
Of
absolutely
course.
anyone, but certain things and certain experiences are something that, it's why we care about representation. I can maybe find a relation in a heterosexual romance, but there is a difference when you see a queer romance on screen as a
Yeah.
queer person
Yeah.
with the very particulars of it. So
Sure.
I think that is also a really big reason as to why, and again, I say that I relate to Lee more than any of other Guadagnino,
Sure.
other Guadagnino characters, including someone like Elio or his other this thing. For me, the specificities, there's moments, looks, anxieties, certain offhanded comments that Lee makes that just hit. Because that is I've been in that situation. I've
Sure.
had that conversation. I felt those exact emotions. So
Yeah.
I think those two things come together for me when I
Sure.
talk about Guadagnino. Of his films, 3 of them, one, I think, again, I concur, Bones and All is objectively bad, even though I deluded myself for over a year into thinking it's not that bad.
You
But
rewatched
we'll
it,
not go
right?
there.
Which is
I
a
rewatched it.
task and some.
It
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
I think the 2 films I struggled. I watched it for Halloween for October, and the 2 films that I struggled to get through were Joker and Bones and All, which is a comparison I do not want to make.
Joker, as in
But
like the
those are
OG
two
Joker.
OG Joker.
Okay.
Those are the 2 ones that I had
Well,
to like
you
stop
clearly
multiple times and take
clearly
breaks.
were set a different example with the sequel, so that probably, at least that one appears better
That
in
was a
retrospect.
different kind of anger. Like that, though,
That's
I
also
don't
true.
hate, I don't dislike it. Why? The same reason I dislike
Sure.
Joker
But I
1.
think
I
with
dislike
Joker,
it on
you also
completely different
liked it when
levels.
it initially released, right? I think that was the whole thing.
That
Mera
is
though,
also
I
true.
think I actually liked it a little bit more on a rewatch. I was just like, but again, I didn't care for it much at all on the first watch.
I think I quite liked it when it came out because, again, this is what, 2018, 29. When was
2019,
Joker?
this is the best year,
2019.
recent best year of
Yeah.
cinema, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is still for me a very nascent stage in my sort of cinephilia.
Sure.
So I'm still very susceptible to arguments about, very, very enthusiastic arguments where I'm still developing the skills to be able to appraise cinema on my own.
Sure.
So I got very much swept up in that it was very, poignantly cruel and all those things. But later,
Sure.
it didn't work for me. Similar thing with Bones and All was different reasons, but like similar sort of an experience that I had reasons to think that it was good. And again, with that story, because cannibalism is one of my favorite cinematic tropes or like literary tropes of all time.
Yeah.
But then later, Bigger Splash, I watched recently, just didn't work for me. I
Mhm.
think the editing I thought was quite difficult for me to sit through,
Hmm.
and just the story didn't come together for me. The ending
It's
is
a
is one
very
hot mess.
it's a it's a very quintessentially French film also, whatever that means.
Again, maybe
Yeah.
not the kind
No,
of cinema
it
I've
is
been
based on
exposed
like a
to. So,
French or classic.
La
So
Piscine, right?
La
Yeah.
Piscine, yeah. So,
So
anyways,
Tilda Swinton again was the only thing that saved
you
that film
really
for me,
liked it,
and the
right? Yeah,
costume design, which I
yeah,
thought was fantastic,
yeah.
which I will be talking about here as well because I love the costume design in Guadagnino's films.
Mhm.
That Suspiria, I'm cold on. I think it's a very interestingly
Mhm.
made film. Don't really care for it. But
Mhm.
then you come to the other three, and they
Mhm.
are three of my favorite films of all time. Like if you made a
Sure.
top 10 list,
Mhm.
at least two of them are going to be on it.
Mhm.
And so Call Me by Your Name is for me was for me like a turning point in my life. And
Sure.
I think
Yeah.
it's a fantastically made film.
Mhm.
But also to me personally, challengers, I think for me, I have the great surprisingly the greatest distance from in that
Mhm.
sense, but I still think it's one of the most entertaining things I have
Mhm.
seen ever. Like I just think
Mhm.
it gets the energy, the concept, the everything of it like just right.
Yeah.
And then Queer, obviously, I think is deeply flawed, but I
Mhm.
think its flaws make me like it even more. Like
Sure.
I
Sure.
see Guadagnino struggling to tell a story that he's always wanted to tell. Like he said,
Sure.
he read the book when he was 17 in the 1980s when it was
Mhm.
published. The book was written in the 1950s, but and that he said, I have wanted to tell the story my entire life, and I see that. And I
Mhm.
think that is why to me, like these three films, and that they are, and that's why to me, Guadagnino, despite the fact that I get the criticisms of his work and I know it's very basic to say or whatever, but he is
Mhm.
one of the filmmakers that in contemporary times like really matters to me and that I will
Sure.
always look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think the basic thing is really the basic thing works. I feel, again, I think it's to do with the subject matter also. I think it's, the basic thing works more when, I think so sorry, just to circle it back. I think it's more this whole thing where in challenges, you could see a director dynamically, trying to take something basic and then
Hmm.
art artsifying it, or making it artsy in
Hmm.
a sort of entertaining way, the quintessential challenge of the artist and entertainment, sort of art and entertainment, sort of that thing.
Hmm.
uh Call Me by Your Name, I think the material is more in sync with his sensibility. I think he's, how to describe him? Like, I think he's like a 70, like actually a bit 70s, 60s European filmmaker, a little bit in a
Hmm.
US setting, in some ways. And
Hmm.
I think it's very much like, to me, his films are on the verge of transgressive as opposed to
Hmm.
transgressive, which might be
Hmm.
the reason why I am
Hmm.
slightly a little, less enthralled by them. Like, to me, I like the
Hmm.
and you were talking about how why I'm also into sort of queer art as a cishet person, right? Like, I
Hmm.
think a lot of it comes down to sensibility and just
Hmm.
experimentation for me. I think it's because, firstly, it's the whole thing that you personally don't understand certain points of view, and there's a joy in, at least for me, in discovering, firstly, voices, of course, of filmmakers, but also
Hmm.
film form I'm fascinated by in general. So, it's, if there are filmmakers who play with conventions, which is very central to queer art in general, right? So I think there's, if
Hmm.
you're going to do all that, I'm automatically in on that level. I also am always fascinated by the softer side of masculinity, which
Hmm.
in queer cinema becomes something which recurs regardless, I think, of whatever you're making. So, I mean, Terence Davies is my favorite
Hmm.
in many ways. I feel sometimes when we are talking about queer artists, where like,
Hmm.
there's lots of things which he goes through and he expresses, which are like, of course, his struggle is central to his queerness, but then they also expand outwards into genuine existential questions, which repressed
Hmm.
feelings, etc., etc. We all go through different things. It's just the basis of it can be different for a lot of people, right? So for me, it's also, I know I like the idea of queer aesthetics being experimental, but then them being used in a way which then talks about something universal. Let's just say that, like, experimental ways of communicating the universal, which I think I was even wonderful in something like we both like it. I saw the I saw the TV glow. Like, to me, it's that
Yeah.
sort of sensibility. So yeah, like, I think with Guadagnino, that's what I said. Like, maybe it's this whole thing where I'm approaching it from the point of view where it's like, but I have seen this done in more transgressive ways. It's just that, like, whenever I see his work, I'm just like, especially with queer, I was like, just you need like that one or two extra pushes to like just topple over into like proper surrealism. Like, you just need to go there. It's like it's almost on the verge of it. And it's like so for which is why I think in retrospect, after seeing Queer, Challengers and Call Me by Your Name actually fit much more, I think, for me as sort of things that come across as more fulfilling projects from him, for me at least. And yeah, I think that's very much the gist of my
No,
thing.
the thing about transgression, I think for me, I like Guadagnino's the way that he sort of toes the line
Yeah,
between convention and transgression. Because
sure.
I've watched Davies' film, I've
Yeah,
seen Haynes's work, I've seen a variety of ways that filmmakers, I mean, much less than you, but in my own little experience
yeah,
here,
yeah.
I feel like I can appreciate the very transgressive stuff, but there's a part of me that also finds a lot of comfort in very conventional
Absolutely. Dude, that's totally
narratives and
fine. Yeah,
filmmaking
yeah.
styles.
Yeah, yeah.
And so for me, what Guadagnino does it's when your one extreme is your Love Simon and all those kinds of
Sure.
very
The
traditional
mainstream.
mainstreamized convention like
Your
heteronormativized
Ayushman
narratives,
Khurrana social message,
social message and all of those
industry
things. And
complex,
the other industrial complex, yes.
industrial
And the
complex.
other end is these kind of roly, like something like Querelle or all these like
Yeah,
roly
yeah. Querelle is
transgressive
the
films.
different side. Like,
And
that's
the
that.
other
Yes. Querelle, for anyone
for
who's
me,
unfamiliar, it's a Rainer Werner
Fassbinder.
Fassbinder film. Fassbinder is a remarkable artist. I've seen a couple of his films. I've loved all of them. He passed away at the age of 37 or 39, but he's made about um 20 to 30 films. So he like made a whole lot of films, like, in that time period of like 20s to, I think, 35, 36. Querelle, I think, is his last film. It was made like 2 3 months before his passing, I think. So yeah, like, just to mention, it's one of his sort of quintessential texts on queer cinema, which is very much referenced now, was not appreciated when it released. I mean, I can still understand if someone doesn't appreciate it now. It's very rough in a way which again, it's the form replicating it's like, mystery. It's the mysteries of love. Let's just go mystery of love, sorry, from call me by your name. Yeah. So, it's that, if you're going to talk about the mystery of love and desire, I would rather you make a film which is mysterious. Like, that's again my approach from it,
Yeah.
which Queer is a little bit, I think. Yeah, we'll go
Yeah.
on to
So
that
so
later.
that's the thing. So yeah, so it's I have a level of comfort in that. For me, it's the right balance between those
Sure,
two things where
sure, sure.
you're breaking convention in the right ways to accommodate for the fact that your stories are
Yeah,
about non-normative relationships and
yeah,
non-normative situations, but you're still allowing a level of familiarity through a
sure.
very and again, his these two films are directly adapted from books and from novels, which again, given my literature background, is something that again like you were saying, you have an issue, but I appreciate the literariness
Yeah,
of
I
these
had a
films
little bit
and
of an
how
issue
they
in
sort of
Call Me by Your Name, not in
hmm,
Queer. I don't think I had that much.
hmm,
I don't mind literariness. Like, I know some of the filmmakers who I really like basically make stage plays.
hmm,
Like Ingmar Bergman is a central one. So yeah, I
hmm,
don't necessarily mind it. It was just there were touches in Call Me by Your Name because the other because Call Me by Your Name otherwise is very reliant on atmosphere of naturalistic atmosphere of exploring uh, or sort of almost naturally finding queerness in that environment. Like for me, it was almost like when there's so much there, but then when you then go ahead and show me a montage of them discovering statues in a lake of like like male anatomy sort of body, which is in the opening credits thing. I'm like, I don't know if that touch is needed. You've already established for me whatever you have already, whatever the mystery is you've established, and whatever push and pull, I'm getting that. So I'm like, maybe not needed. But then the part of the film which is my favorite is also relies a lot on saying everything out loud. It's not like expression which is closed off. So it swings in roundabout.
तो उसी बात पे Call Me by Your Name पे चले.
Chalo chalo, आप ही चलो. I'll follow suit. Yeah.
I can show you around.
That'd be great. Thank you. So what do you do around here?
Read books, transcribe music, swim at the river, go out at night.
Sounds fun. All right, later.
Sicuramente è meglio di quello dell'anno scorso.
Just watch. This is how we'll say goodbye to us when the time comes. Later.
Okay, I will. I mean, should I give a summary courtesy of IMDb? किसी को चाहिए? Well, is there anybody out there who won't know?
So I'm just gonna, I don't know if this is rude, but I'm gonna say that most of the listeners for this episode will be your hive. So you see if they need a they need a description. But no, just give a description. By chance someone else stumbles on this and hasn't seen Call Me by Your Name, then why not? Yeah.
Okay, so again, so Call Me by Name summary courtesy IMDb. Thank you, IMDb. It's the summer of 1983, and 17-year-old Elio is spending the days with his family at their villa in Lombardy, Italy. He soon meets Oliver, who's working as an intern for Elio's father. They discover the heady beauty of awakening desire.
Sure.
So this film, a couple of interesting things that I want to say. First of all, the screenwriter is James Ivory, who is of Merchant and Ivory, very, very famous
Yes.
filmmakers. And
British.
my particular favorite, I think so, yeah. Ivory is,
Yeah.
I think, British. My favorite film of theirs is Maurice, which is a classic queer text.
With Hugh Grant, right?
Hugh Grant, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's based on the book of the same name by writer Andre Asman, which also has its own controversy around it before even the film was made, because Asman has made apparently some problematic comments. And again, cishet man writing queer books, so that kind of
Oh, he's a
discourse,
cishet man. I didn't. Okay, I thought he
yes,
was. Yeah.
I'm quite averse to that kind of discourse, but
Sure.
that is
Oh
also
yeah,
there.
we've talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
We will
And the
expand on it
cinematographer
also.
is
Not that
also,
we-
yes, is Sayombo Mukdipram, who is an absolute legend. And yeah,
Who
so
should have been nominated? Definitely.
yes, for like,
If
I mean,
not
it
for
should have
queer,
been
then for
3 nominations.
challengers. Yeah,
He
like
also
for-
did Trap. I've heard
it-
apparently that was very
Trap apparently Trap won't get nominated. But no, but I think it might also be it's cancelled out. It's like when two nominations you have. I'm giving the Academy the benefit of the doubt when I really shouldn't. But anyway.
I am not giving them the
No, no,
benefit
I'm
of the
not-
doubt
I'm
when
not.
Emilia
You
Perez has
shouldn't.
13
Yeah.
nominations.
No, you shouldn't. I don't think they
Sorry.
deserve it. So yeah.
So
Anyways,
you
yeah.
want to start off with your general thoughts on the film?
You want me to go first? Okay.
Go.
No, I'll go. I saw it first time. I think it was one of the. I attended NYFF for the first time, I think. So I was also in that very excited sort of, oh wow, fancy film festival mode. By fancy film festival, I went and saw 5 movies. That's like nothing for a cineast, I feel. Later, then, of course, I've seen like 20, 25 odd films there, which fried my brain to a different extent. But anyways.
That is the other end of
वहीं
the
पे
brain
bones
rot
and all
spectrum.
का वहीं पे मिला था मुझे experience, which I still
That
remember.
film I saw that the film won that award at Venice. I was like,
It
ये
won the
Venice
award,
वालों ने क्या फोका है?
Italy. Guadagnino
sorry.
is Italian. No? So sorry,
okay.
I'm just gonna go that way because it's the same. है थोड़ा favoritism तो ठीक है कोई बात नहीं. Anyways, I just remember Boys and All as the only film in which I've legitimately walked out of the Q&A session that happens as soon as the film ended. I was just like, I am not hearing a single word of this, like justification for any of whatever shit I had to see for the past whatever 2 hours 17 minutes. Anyways, Call Me by Your Name I saw. I think it was one of the favorites of the festival. How many Academy Awards was it nominated for? A bunch, I'm pretty sure, right?
Yeah. Ivory, I
Did it
think,
win
won
anything?
also the
Ivory won?
best adapted screenplay.
Okay. I think that's the only thing it won, though. I don't
Hmm.
think it won much more. I don't know
Yeah.
which film it won Best Film that year. Anyways, 2017 it was. So
Hmm.
yeah, when I watched it, then I sort of I watched it amidst all the hype and everything. So I was anyways, I watched it. I was like, yeah, it was good. Like I got like it's pretty fun. Like it's pretty good. Like I like the moments which everyone liked, which we will get to. And but there was something missing, I think, from the romance
Hmm.
for me. Like I think it was this whole sense where I was like, I didn't get the feeling of the sort of suppressed desire, then sort of finding an expression, and then needing to be suppressed again in Elio and Oliver's relationship at that time.
Hmm.
So when I rewatched it, I honestly expected it to like it fair bit more, and I think in comparison to that time, I did like it more. Though very much not to your levels. It was very much. I still think it's like the subdued liking, but I was like, I really, when it began, I was like, oh wow, this is like really good, like in terms of, because now of course, that time I didn't pay that much attention to film form, didn't pay that much attention to mood and atmosphere and how much that creates an effect on you. But I love, so I messaged you saying that I would love to go to this place and like, love to stay in this place and I would love to, just hang around because that's where the whole sensuality angle comes probably. It's this whole thing of transporting you to a certain place in time, and I think that he gets down absolutely perfectly. I think for Call Me by Your Name, it's like you are in northern Italy at that point in time in 1980s, I think,
83.
83, and so you basically are there, and I think that itself automatically achieves a lot because once you're already believing in the vibe of the place, you're sort of automatically in tune with the movie. And I think for the first hour I was like, you know what, this is really good. In like I this is much like, in terms of whatever is going on here, I'm really into it in terms of the power play or the flirtation that happens via power play between Armie Hammer and Timothy Chalamet's character. And it's like very gentle, and it's sort of, there's no like, nudging us who's in charge and all that. I mean, it's fairly evident in the way he says, quote unquote, later. Army Hammer. I'm surprised I addressed him as Army Hammer. Sorry, I'll correct that later. But no, I think it's this whole thing where Elio has this. I guess this is something which it's not probably just a queer thing, but probably whenever you are attracted to someone, this whole thing where you don't know how to react. It's like you don't know how to, do you want to appear aggressive or do you want to appear like you are one who wants to be dominated in that relationship. So that push and pull is really wonderfully handled in the beginning, and then uh, Oliver's character is fairly unsympathetic, I think, for that opening chunk, because I think a lot of the drama you are seeing as close as possible through Elio's eyes. There's not like an omniscient thing. It's more linked to his subjectivity as opposed to omniscience, right? So so yeah, like that first, until they essentially reveal to each other when their affections for each other, and the fact um, that Elio is queer, but he says it in a sort of very sideways way. It's not said straight out. It's like, this is my secret, but it's like almost whatever. Once that happens, I think whatever the mystery of that attraction was, sort of then for me dovetails into like this whole chunk in the middle chunk. Sorry, my mind is working in cannibal territory now. But
You
but
would say it loses its bite.
it loses its. I don't think it loses its bite. It's more just the sense that I think the way in which their relationship plays out is fairly broad for my liking. There are specific things in it which I like. Like there's the later, of course. There's the pendant I think that he wears, and then there's this equation or somewhat equation between suppressing Jewish identity and homosexuality, which I think is very interesting, but I think is sort of just like very nicely pushed away after being like addressed. Like एक बार address होने के बाद they just like sort of leave that out. So like it's almost like Armie Hammer's character makes him come out in two ways into actually because he starts wearing the pendant I think after that if I remember correctly but yeah like I think whatever then the power play between them is I thought power play nahi hai. After that it's basically like a relationship and I thought those moments apart from the very famous peach moment I think are less convincing. I was quite interested in the other triangle that was going on in how Elio balances his relationship with Marsha. Marsha? That's her name?
Marzia.
Marzia. Okay. So with her, it's like that. I have written here triangle of predation and romance, whatever that means. So it's like who like how he's in control in one relationship, but he is sort of being controlled in one. And by that, I don't mean it in a crass way. I think like the exploitative angle of romance is sort of part of it. Like I think there is, and the film is, I think, pretty. That's what I found fascinating. I think that's the controversy, right? I actually found it very fascinating that their relationship can have different names. It can be considered slightly predatory, but it is also very genuinely romantic. Those two things can coexist, I think. And in general, if so I think that stuff I like. But then yeah, I think it's just more a case of loving the initial bit, then sort of coming down and sort of being okay with the stuff after that. I'm not entirely sure about Timothy Chalamet's performance post he expresses um, stuff to Oliver. That's all I have to say. I suppose we'll expand on it, I think, later. But then the final sequence happens, not the final sequence, but the pre-final sequence, and that is the other angle of the film, which I think really is terrific for me. This whole idea of the parents and how they address queerness to Elio and how that I think was a pretty big thing even at that point in time where the cliche of the parents cliche sort of got absolutely taken and thrown into the dustbin. And I think I saw a couple of movies after that which also did that, where they just turned the parents into these very understanding people who are sort of um, talking about desire and talking about the laws of desire and just how it is. I have noted down one quote which I'll say later, but yeah, like whatever. Michael Stuhlbarg is amazing in his scene. He's amazing in general, but so is I think Amira Kassar or Kassar. I forgot. I don't know how to pronounce the second name, but she plays the mother, and throughout the film has these wonderful moments where she's just like glancing and just telling, like nudging Oliver to just to getting used to Oliver in a. It's a later, of course, they also start repeating it. Then it's also just pushing him to go with Oliver for a trip, everything. So it's like all the nudging stuff I thought was very wonderfully handled, and her performance sort of is very coy about it. It's not, she doesn't get the big moment like Stuhlbarg, but it's very nicely peppered in throughout the narrative. So yeah, a very good movie. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that I don't love it, which comes. I think this is my general impression of most Guadagnino films. So, anyways, you
No,
can
but
gush
that's valid
over it.
also. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think what I wanted to frame it was, so I wrote a paper about this film in my
Okay.
undergrad,
Mm.
and I called it "Call Me by Your Name" is queer utopian fiction.
Okay.
And so in literature, utopia is not only defined by the fact that it is sort of ideal, but also that it's always at the cusp of of crumbling or the cusp of falling
Sure.
apart. And I think that is what Call Me by Your Name very much does. So the book originally is set in 1987, but then Guadagnino resets in 83, particularly because the 80s you're talking about the AIDS epidemic and you're talking
Yes.
about Reagan and Thatcher.
Yeah.
So he's trying to set it in a place where, and a place and time where it's almost a little chunk that is unaffected by the corruption of the rest of the world around it.
Sure.
So it's a sort of bubble that exists.
Sure.
And I think that also is something that runs throughout the film, where essentially the ending with the fact that Oliver's getting married and all those things
Yes.
is that thing that sort of finally bursts that bubble. But
Yes.
for the summer, the 6 weeks that they spend together,
Yeah.
it is utopia.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's how I like to think of the film. And so that's why,
Sure.
even while I get what you say with the predatory aspect of it and all that, we'll get to it when we talk about the discourse. I don't really like to think of it that
Sure.
way. I think also because if you understand, like I was having a discussion with my professor actually, and he pointed this out. If you look at the history of homosexuality, it's actually been very undemocratic, very unequal.
Yeah.
You talk about, say, pederasty as a Greek tradition, you talk about the abuses in the Catholic Church. It's always been a dynamic plagued by power difference, because
Sure.
that's the only ways that it was able to be expressed. Like, it was very
Yeah.
difficult to have it in a very egalitarian manner.
Sure.
So while this is not obviously it is a consensual relationship, that dynamic, I think, is also very indicative of the time and of the context in which that
Sure.
relationship exists.
Yeah.
So you can say that there is a power play, which there obviously is.
Yeah.
There's that age gap and all those things, but
Yeah.
I feel like it's a very heteronormative, very modern conceptualization of predation when people
No,
look
no,
at their age
absolutely.
gap
No,
and
no.
stuff.
I think in overall, the impression I get
Mm.
from the film is that Guadagnino thinks it is romantic. It is not it's there. Like, I felt the beginning. I think why I responded more to the beginning is because it's at the edge of those two, where it's like romance and predation. So it's like you don't know. It's not been given a name, for the lack of better word. Like, it's that namelessness at that point in time where it's like you don't know what this relationship actually is. And I, for the longest part, partially because also it's played by Mr. Hammer now. So, like, I found it a bit hard to, sympathize with that character in general. And he is pretty cocky in that sort of American, annoying, way, which I understand can be attractive to people and, to LUATs in that sort of way also. But I was just like, I was very much on Elio's side, if that makes sense. So, it was,
Yeah,
yeah. No, go ahead.
No, in that way, that's the second thing, right? For me, I've never looked at the film as a romance.
Sure.
To me,
You
I
said
don't
this, yeah.
need to buy into the romance at all, because to me,
Sure.
it is a character story. It is
Yeah.
as they say in literature, it's a Bildungsroman. It's a coming of age story,
Mhm.
and it's very much about a lot of people think of it as like, and again, one bone I have to pick with Asaman is he wrote a sequel, and it is horrendous. It's called Find Me.
Oh.
It is really, really bad. Michael
So
Stolberg's
this
character has then
ends. So his
So-
novel ends in the same way that this ends.
no. So
Okay.
that's why for me, this is one of the places where the movie adaptation is far better
Better.
is better than the book is.
Mhm.
In the end of Call Me by Name, the book, the two of them meet again.
Okay.
So Elio visits Oliver in America, and then in the sequel, they've got Stalbag also having an age gap romance with a much younger lady. Because he gets divorced with his wife, and then you've got another arc of Elio having another age gap romance with an older man, and then eventually they'll end up together. They come back to this house in Italy, and they
Oh, it's like
Oliver and
father-son
Elio
thing it
settle back.
becomes.
It's odd. That's
Okay.
just so it's I've got a bone to pick there, but I think here I don't think of it as a love story, or I don't like a lot of people think of Elio and Oliver as this like one true love that couldn't be fulfilled, but that's not how I see it. I wrote about this also. It's a moment. It's a moment that changes you for the rest of your life,
Sure.
and it's beautiful for the moment that it was there, but once it's gone, it's gone.
Sure.
And that's why for me the romance, I don't genuine. Like, I
Mhm.
think for me the romance works, but that's not what makes me appreciate the
Sure.
film. It is,
Sure.
and I love Chalamet's performance. I think he does an
Okay.
excellent job
Hmm.
with the material. And that's the sort of fundamental for me. So on those points, but
Mhm.
so in general, when talking about the film, so I mentioned this earlier as well, but I had not watched much queer cinema at all.
Mhm.
I kept sort of myself away from it. But then
Mhm.
I had a time where, okay, I'm getting into it. So I watched all of the classics. I watched Brokeback
Mhm.
Mountain. I watched Moonlight. I watched this and all those things.
Mhm.
And this was particularly recommended to me by my partner at the time. And so
Mhm.
it came to me at a moment where I needed something like this, where I
Sure.
needed to me, it's not even a quote unquote queer film, even though it is a
Hmm.
queer film.
I think he
It
also
is a
says something like
story.
this, no?
He also says it's a story about desire. It's not a
Hmm.
story about two men falling in love. And
Sure.
that to me, I really resonated with me, because there is so much politicization and politics around the identity itself,
Hmm.
that you sometimes really get exhausted of the
Hmm.
labels and this and that and everything. And
Yeah.
you crave for something where it treats it as, just another romance
Sure.
story, just a connection between two people, or desire
Mhm.
between two people, a push and pull, a taboo that isn't explicitly named as well. I mean, it's
Yes.
implied heavily, but like,
Yeah.
I don't think they say the word gay
There's
at any point in the film.
I think there's this whole thing, right, where they, this is another instance of the parents sort of having a open, progressive mindset, I suppose. It's where the two gay friends attend their house, and I think Oliver or Elio makes fun of them, I think, by saying
Yeah, Elio
Sonny,
makes fun of them. Yeah.
by calling them
Sunny and
Sonny and
Cher.
Cher. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sonny and Cher. So I think it's the whole thing. I think of it is there. It's just whenever it's out in the open, it's sort of mocked at, I suppose, by even people who identify with the sort
With
of
it.
with the community
Yeah.
at
So
that point of view.
yeah. So apart from that sort of one sequence,
Mhm.
it's essentially never addressed
Yeah.
throughout. It's always through that implication. And again,
Yeah.
coming to Michael Stahlberg's end, the ending scene, it's
Mm.
just, I have never watched that, even just the clip, and not
Yeah.
started crying.
Yeah. No, it's
Because
wonderful.
again, it's actually a little bit longer in the book, but I think
Mm.
they picked up.
Oh, the words
Ivory
are
picks up the
also from the
they're
book
very
only, or?
similar.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah. So my favorite line from that is, there's a French saying that he says, and
Mm.
pardon my French, but he says,
Mhm.
parce que c'était lui, parce que c'était moi, because
Mm.
it was him, because it was me. And
Mm.
Stolberg in the book gives the whole context that it was from, I think, Byron or someone's letters
Mhm.
to someone, and that's all. There's a whole
Mm.
history of writers having
Mhm.
lovers and all that sort of stuff. But I think Ivory picks up exactly the core of
Mm.
what that was trying to say, and Stahlberg's
Mm.
incredible performance. And
Mm.
I think even Chalamet's reactions to it, it just
Mm.
it touches on it just so beautifully. And that's why I
Yeah.
called it queer utopian, because the true utopia for like a queer person is that, when we, even though we say that familial acceptance, whatever, but it
Mhm.
matters. It makes a
Yeah.
huge
Yeah.
difference.
Mhm.
Like, I even if you look at the statistics, like, in the trans
Mm.
community, for example,
Mm.
the chances of the chances of a trans person committing suicide is reduced by 16 by 17 16 17ths
Mm.
if there is one supportive parents in their life. That's what, 94% or something.
Yeah.
So it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So throughout the film, the way that his parents react, and or the fact that they you know that they know,
Mhm.
and and how it comes out, it just, for me, it's just, there's that emotional resonance at a very deep level. And apart from that, another trivial thing that for me resonates, again, I think I appreciate it every time more, because again, as a philosophy student, there's
Mm.
references to Heraclitus and Heidegger that I didn't pick up the first time, but
Mhm.
now when I watch it, I know what they're talking about, even
Mhm.
in those literary bits of it. So
Yeah.
it just happens to be that it fits right into my world
Sure.
in a way. So
No,
that's
it makes sense. I mean, totally
across
makes
all.
sense.
Yeah.
If there is, the one thing I still think is a mistake on the film's part is resolving the Marzia and Elio relationship. I thought that
Okay.
was a little too much of a softening. I think it does her character also a little bit of disservice. But I thought there is a potential to keep that more open-ended, because you're anyways closing the loop with um Armie Hammer's character and Timothy Chalamet, right? So because when they're talking on the phone, it is their love is expressed there also. But I think Marsha I think it would be interesting to see her as an example who doesn't, um, you know, I think that this maybe plays into a utopia thing, but I felt it did her character. um, l- she is a very supporting character in the film, so she's not given that much room to be explored also. So but when she comes just straight out of there and she's like, we'll be whatever, I think friends forever or so, I was just like, I don't know about this. Like, I'm like, you don't need to like simplify it. But you said it's in the novel, but I was just like, if you're doing the changes in any case, then I'm like, it would be interesting to leave that strand open, as a sort of, what you do to people also sort of has, I suppose, consequences to them. Like nothing sort of not all of it doesn't sort of fit together in a sort of cozy, utopian narrative. And I know the film at the end is not about the utopian moment. It's about it ending also. It's this whole thing where it ends and then you move on to queer, essentially, right? It's like that essentially. Because you can in many ways see Elio as a grown-up Lee, uh, in a different
Yeah.
sort of in a
No,
environment.
and
But
the one last thing I think before we switch over to whether I want to talk
yeah.
about is, I know we have a disagreement here, is on the sex scenes in
Oh
Call Me by
yes,
Your
I
Name in
wanted to ask.
particular.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you this
Yes.
also. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
yeah, because I've heard about the controversy on that, and I think he's generally a little too prudish with
Okay.
showing. I mean, in Queer, there's one scene which I think is pretty explicit or frank in its depiction. The other one I thought was again doing the let's pan the camera left and then pan the camera right so that we don't need to see everything. And I'm like, I don't know if you need to do that. You, especially for this film, you don't need to do that. But anyways, no. In this, I was like, it was surprising why he decides to omit it, in the sense that to me it's also like this sort of goes into the whole mainstream sensibility also. It's like, these actors are not ready to uh, be nude for the scene, or don't want to show their anatomy for that particular scene, because the only person who actually probably is naked and we see her naked is Marzia.
Is Mazia.
She is the one who we see. So I'm like, I was like, if you're gonna show that sex scene, you probably better off also showing a contrast with that. In like, you get at least whatever, you get two different forms of desire also expressed in two different places, right? The fact that we just pan, I think it's again another pan to an open window. I know Swayambhu Mukti loves his open windows, because it's a recurring theme through a lot of Apichat Pong films. But it's like, I think it pans to the left, and I was like, I don't know. I wouldn't have minded if like it doesn't need to be like, an explicit sex scene. It just needs to be shown, I think, more than anything. That's why I think the peach scene is effective, because it is playful also, but it has a sort of sexiness to it, and it doesn't shy away. Well, it is at a distance. It's not going close up, which fair, whatever. Again, so this is maybe the issue. I'm like, if Claire Denis was there, she would have cut to that close up. Not of she wouldn't have cut to the close up of the sex. She would have cut to the close up of him taking a bite of the peach.
Huh.
It's that
Yeah.
difference almost. I mean, I feel like, why be so prudish when you're anyways sort of knocking at the? I suppose it's to do with the censors. It's a lot of things here and there, but I'm like, if you're showing the female nudity, then go at least show the male nudity also, like, in proper terms. But Marzia's French, right? So I guess
No,
that's allowed.
yeah, no, so I get the sort of political or the metatext or the outside of the text sort of arguments that you're making, and I can understand where it comes from, but I think for me in the text it works.
Okay.
I think particularly because the juxtaposition that Guadagnino is trying to make between Mazia and Elio's relationship and Oliver's relationship. Mazia and
Purer.
Elio's is very much yeah, in a way you can say it's prudish in a sense, but I think there is very much that theirs is a more sexual, Elio also refers to his parents when he's talking about Mazia in the sense that, oh, we almost had sex last night, and it's in a very like
Yeah, I can
young
buy your
heterosexual
argument. Yeah, I can buy
that,
your argument.
and theirs is almost, like I said, it's almost sacred, It's
Oh,
that
yeah.
this is too intimate. Like that intimacy is held sacred. So this is too intimate for me to be able to show it to you.
Fair.
And
I
that
can
so
buy
the
that. I can
so
buy
that's
that
how it works
position.
for me
Hmm.
in the narrative itself. I mean, I think in that sense that the peach scene is more explicit makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
It's that the consummation itself is the true sort of the sacred, but then
Yeah.
after that, as they sort of become more sexually comfortable with each other, it becomes slightly more sort of explicit. So that's how, at
Nahi,
least
fair.
textually, at least
I get what you mean.
within the
Yeah.
narrative, I can
I will
justify.
let this complaint go, I think. Like I would, like
Onto
it
onto
matters. But anyways, uh,
onto slightly more by your account, slightly more explicit sex scenes, shall we?
We're all parts of a tremendous whole. A curse. There's no use fighting it.
The difficulty is to convince someone else he is really part of you.
You think he's queer? I've been spending time with him. I can't tell.
Well, could always just ask.
No. I want to talk to you without speaking.
Summary courtesy IMDb. In 1950s Mexico City, an American immigrant in his late 40s leads a solitary life amidst a small American community. However, the arrival of a young student stirs the man into finally establishing a meaningful connection with someone. So the film is based on William S. Burroughs' 1985 novel of the same name, which is a sequel to the 1953 novel Junkie, which he wrote sort of in parallel to
is
each
this his
other.
last novel?
I think last published. I think I might be wrong, but it was definitely written back in the
Because it was the
1950s
whole
itself.
that his death is integrated into the
Yeah.
narrative here, is what I was reading a little bit in the film.
Yeah, I mean it's not in the book. So the book,
So in like Luke
one of the
Guadagnino added it sort of in this.
added it into
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
Okay.
So the book, as I was explaining to Dhruv, Burroughs is essentially part of what is called the B generation. I did a lot of but when I tell you I did a lot of research for this, I spent
You
the
should
last
post your
8
notes.
months.
You should post your notes. Yeah.
I have watched at least like 8 or 10 films, read 4 books.
You had recommended a film which I haven't watched, but I've sort of scanned through the opening of it, so I know what stylistic stuff you're also talking about a little bit. So this is another. You watched everything by Daniel Craig. You should announce yourself as a Craigie. Is it a? Can you call someone a Craigie? I don't know.
The funny thing is, I was not even a big Daniel Craig fan when the
Really?
James Bond films came out. He's one of my least favorite Bonds. I'm a big Pierce Brosnan fan.
Okay, interesting. So you just
So,
like Benoit
but
Blanc.
No, so Casino Royale I always loved because I'm a big fan of Mads Mikkelsen.
Great movie.
Then in retrospect, I also think it's a pretty good. It's a fantastic
Great
film. I also
movie.
I think it's the one Craig performance I do like out of.
You don't like Skyfall?
Not as much as Casino Royale.
No,
but then,
that is okay. But like I've seen five
it's
he's
nice.
done, right?
Yeah, 5. I saw the last one in theater. It was not good.
So out of the 5, I really like 2 only.
Yeah.
And then the other Spectre, though, I slept off, I think, when I was rewatching. So boring. Anyways, sorry.
Quantum of Solace, I to forget
Quantum of Solace, I
like...
can defend. But that film, I think, only works if you see it legitimately straight after Casino Royale. Because it's literally an epilogue. It's not like it's that. And I actually like Craig in that. Like, he's very angry throughout the film. I think so. I like that.
I'm not into my Bonds being angry. I like the very charismatic.
You're the camp
suave,
generation of Bond. I've only known the super serious, that Bond. So for me, it's that.
Yeah.
But if you want a James Bond, episode, we have it in store. I think Amartya and all the guys here, the alpha guys, alpha males, I suppose, are the Purush Pradhan committee members are the experts in that. I have only seen the
Yeah.
Craig one, so I apologize. Anyways, yeah.
So for me, it was actually after I watched Knives Out and I saw Benoit
Hmm.
Blanc that I started, then I went retrospectively and I started watching. So I watched Love is the Devil, study of a portrait of
It's a
Francis
TV
Bacon,
movie.
and
It is.
also
It's not even a movie, I think.
it's on, yeah. It's Francis Bacon is a very famous British painter, and it's
Hmm.
about it. Apparently, his work heavily inspired queer as well.
Sure.
The movie,
Movie. Yep.
and I also watched a film called Infamous, which is the life of Truman Capote, which was also made into a film starring
Hmm.
Philip Seymour Hoffman, also called
You
Capote.
saw the Philip Seymour Hoffman version or the
I didn't see that one.
Okay,
I
okay.
watched the Craig one where
Sure.
there's a romance between Craig and Capote's character.
Okay. Okay.
So that I just wanted to watch films where
Sure.
Daniel Craig plays queer characters, and there's a surprising number of
Yeah, a
them
lot of them, right?
competing with his wife for an equal number
Ah,
of
yeah,
them.
yeah. It's the Rachel Weisz. Yeah. For people who are
They
not
are
familiar, I suppose Rachel Weisz is his wife.
they are for us they're like the cinematic pansexual couple for like the queer community. So
I love Rachel Weisz also. She's so good. I love her voice actually more than anything else. She has a godly voice. Anyways, I have
yeah,
fond about this in other places, so I will leave that for that. Anyways,
no, I mean
yeah.
she's the one in the Mummy, right? uh
That's
is
your
she?
memory of Rachel Weisz?
I'm sorry, that was like my childhood gay awakening. I'm sorry, you're not allowed to make
The
fun of the Mummy.
Brendan
Like
Fraser.
Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz film. Yes, I'm
I'm
not
here
letting you
thinking
insult
the
it.
favorite, and you're thinking the Mummy. Nice. Anyways.
I mean, our difference in taste is being
No,
very
I've
explicitly put
actually
into
never.
words
I don't
here.
think I remember this. I unfortunately saw the new Mummy, which was awful.
Oh.
But I've seen her in a. Yeah, I've seen her. I'm just looking at her. I've opened the
Mm,
IMDb of her filmography.
mm,
I've seen her in Disobedience with Rachel McAdams,
mm,
which is a decent movie, but they have good chemistry and they have a very, I suppose, celebrated sex scene in that.
mm,
Then favorite, I think all three are tremendous. I think the Olivia Colman, Emma Stone, and Rachel Weisz, but it's a great
mm,
triangle of affairs they have between each other. And
mm.
yeah, I've seen, but yeah, I've not seen The Mummy. I'm sorry. Uh,
uh,
she was also
Probably
in The
not
Mummy
worth rewatching. I'm just
Returns.
lovely memories that I will keep and not ruin them by rewatching the film. But Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz were glowing
Was
in
Brendan
that
Fraser
film.
the guy who was at that time attractive to people? I don't know.
Yeah, he was.
Okay,
He was an absolute heartthrob at the time.
I don't know. Again, I've only seen him in The Whale, a movie I don't like also. So, anyways.
Um, yeah, so I read 4 books from the V generation. So my introduction to them happens because I read and watched. There's a film also called Howl, which is
Hmm,
based on the work of Allen Ginsberg. So Allen
hmm,
Ginsberg, Jack Kerouac, and William S. Burroughs are writers the post-war era who become
hmm,
what is called the V generation today,
hmm.
and their writing style is very much uh, opposed to convention and
Sure.
opposed to. And it also happens that all 3 of them were queer men. Jack
Okay.
Kerouac was bisexual, and Ginsberg was gay. Burroughs is somewhere between gay and bisexual because he was
Hmm,
in fact married, but then also queer and all of that.
sure.
But Naked Lunch is Burroughs' most famous work,
Oh,
and
yes, I
there is
have heard
essentially
David Cronenberg.
yes.
I've not seen that,
I
but I've.
tried watching it. I just wasn't able to stomach it. So I
Oh,
had to
okay.
stop
Oh,
after like the
is it
first
like
10 minutes.
really gory?
It is really icky,
Oh, it's
not
like body
gory.
horror scrungy.
Yeah, very like a lot of
Oh,
big bugs
lovely.
and all
I
of
will.
those things. I can't.
I need to watch Naked Lunch, right?
So
I like
Naked
Cronenberg,
Lunch.
so
Hmm.
yeah. Sorry,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So no, Naked Lunch essentially. पहले तो you Varosa said you can read the chapters in any order and it will make the same amount of sense. And essentially the narrative doesn't continue for more than 3 paragraphs at a time. It just
Wow.
keeps changing. So it's a full novel where essentially each paragraph is its own thing.
Wow.
So very, very disjointed writing. Compared to that, which is essentially set just before Queer. So William Lee, Burroughs and
They
the
are the
like
same
write what is
character.
called
Share the
autofiction.
same character.
Same character. So they
Okay.
write what is called autofiction,
Oh,
where they
yeah.
take autobiographical stories and just change the names around.
Yeah.
So William as Burroughs becomes William Lee, and Allerton also was based on a guy named Adalbert Lewis Marker,
Okay.
who Burroughs was in love with, and then becomes Eugene Allerton here. So in
Sure.
Junkie, he's in America. It's all about his drug abuse, which is a big
Yeah.
part of Queer as
Set
well.
when?
But then
1940s? 30s?
I think around the fifth. No, I think it's set in the 50s only.
50s only. Okay.
Late 40s and early
Okay.
50s.
Mhm.
So post-war essentially.
Sure. Mhm.
And he at the end of that book he is charged with drug charges in the US. So he escapes to Mexico to sit out the statute of limitations, which is when he meets Eugene Allerton.
Mhm.
And then sort of the romance ensues from there. I'll go first on this. If you don't mind.
Yes, please do, because again, you love it much more than I do.
I do. And so yeah, the first thing is very much you can tell this that it's a very compromised edit of the film. Like
Very
a
much
lot of
so.
discussions say that it was the origin was about 3 hours in its runtime, but then was cut down to I think 2 hours 17 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can it shows because there are a lot of the moments where it's rushed and it's cut together and
Yeah,
all
if
these
any
things, but
movie that deserves a director's cut, maybe this one more than I don't want any Ridley Scott director's cuts roaming around. Please give Guadagnino this one and allow him to
give
put that
Guadagnino.
cut.
So the book itself is very loosely told. It doesn't really have a narrative structure. It's just him sort of wandering around Mexico. And then it actually, in the book, they actually never even get the drug. So they get to
Yage
South America.
or what is Yahe?
Yahe.
Yeah.
Yahe. They
Yeah.
get there. Leslie Manville's character equivalent rejects them and they just leave. And the book
Okay.
just sort of ends there. So, and it's mostly like, if you remember the scene where Craig talks about the pig, like that sort of thing where they're talking about, and we add this new dish to the menu where the pig is running
Yes.
around.
Oh, they probably
It's
have
essentially
a
where
description of it in the novel, which is like florid
yeah,
and
but it's
everything.
essentially like a series of this thing. So he goes and he sits on a table and then he starts monologuing and the people on the table leave and he's just talking about random things.
So
So it's a
he's like a
very sort of
mad,
loose,
essentially he loses his marbles, essentially.
loses his marbles and he's on a lot of drugs, like
Yeah, that
extremely.
even he is in this. I was like, itna koi, I'm like,
No,
how is he surviving? Like at one point I was like,
No, I
anyway.
was surprised how long it took for the film to reach to the scene where Daniel Craig's character actually shoots drugs on screen, because
That's
every like
that's
5
the
minutes
one
in the
take
book.
scene, which I was very interesting. I was like, why
Yeah.
is this one like in my head at that point? And I was reading a couple of things. I was like, yeah, interesting. I mean, it is a very memorable scene because it sort of almost feels like a narrative break. After that, I think we move to chapter 2, right? If I'm not wrong.
Chapter 2, yeah.
Yeah. So the film split into
So
4 chapters, 3 chapters, and then one
3,
epilogue,
no?
right? 3 chapters, one
Yeah.
epilogue.
Epilogue, yeah.
Okay.
So the thing is, I have a lot of respect for Justin Kuritzkes to get this into an actual working screenplay, because
Justin
that would have been one hell of a
Kuritzkes,
task.
for whoever is not
Is
familiar, is the husband of Celine Song,
a filmmaker.
who made Chris and my favorite romance of the past year, Past Lives, which we have talked about in detail.
Which I get mad about on Twitter every 3 months when like that Cine Aesthetic page posts photos from it and everybody gushes about it.
You should just post a counter post of kuch kuch hota hai, and I'm like, ye dekho aap log.
Very true.
Especially the
Despite the
scene
fact
when
that
when they do their whatever handshake they have and kuch kuch hota hai. I mean, I know that film is incredibly problematic. No one's denying that. But that film has more of a beating heart than
It's-
Past Lives. But anyways, we move on.
Yeah, so a lot of respect for Kuritzkes to be able to make it into a sort of working screenplay. But then I think for me, what works the most, I think, so there's a lot of elements. I think number one is, I think the production design is just gorgeous. I think especially when you compare it, and you can put down your counter one more when you compare it to something like Mexico's depiction in Emilia Perez, which is trying to represent quote unquote Mexico.
Yeah.
And you see
Yeah, this
Guadagnino's
is the
take where it's very
artifice.
much
Hmm.
this is Lee's Mexico. It's
Yes.
not Mexico.
Yeah.
It's what he sees through his haze, through his world, through
Yeah.
the one bar to the next that he visits, and the hotel room in his house. It's so I think the production design is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Second, and I need to give a shout out here, Jonathan Anderson on the costume design. So as someone who's a big fan of men's tailoring, I think the costume design is impeccable. From also the sort of individual, like I love the opening where they lay out all the accessories, from the glasses.
Yes, that's
the
actually a
gun.
commonality even in Call Me by Your Name. And like I know, Call Me by Your Name is not about accessories. It's about like a montage of the statues, the photographs of
Yeah.
statues. Here it's like what all constitutes Lee's life, and I think it's
Yeah.
like I think there's drugs and guns and whatever else like whatever things he has also there. Yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, so that I think was what was absolutely fantastic. Obviously, the cinematography again, Saimbo Mukdiprom being an absolute king, does a fantastic job with it. But for me, I think the central this thing of it is very much Craig's performance and what Guadagnino does with it, because it's a very, I think, far more than something like Call Me by Your Name. This is a story where you can talk about predation and an older man and the younger man dynamic between the two of them, and this whole, again, why I made Dhruv read Foucault for this, which I apologize. I sincerely apologize.
I read only
told
the
you not to
one
read
page.
it.
I only read the one article. I didn't read the 15-page explanation. I thought the one page one was not bad, to be very honest. Apart from some names, like some words which I didn't. I was just like, I'm doing the going over my head everywhere, which is fine. I don't mind like Googling what something means. It's just academia, and it's gatekeeping stuff is a bit
Gatekeeping.
annoying, but whatever. It's
Again,
good.
as a philosophy student, I give my sincerest apologies to everyone who's gotten turned off because of all of the miserable gatekeeping and ivory towering that academics have done. But essentially, what Foucault talks about in volume 1 of History of Sexuality is this distinction between a sodomite and a homosexual. So sodomite obviously is a term that comes from the story of Sodom and Gomorrah from the Bible, but it's about the difference between men who have sex with men as a condition, or just as a phenomenon, to homosexuality as a pathology, as a type of person. So I think in queer, a very interesting thing, and I absolutely appreciate Kuritskis and Guadagnino for doing this. There's a very interesting linguistic things that happen if you see. So the use the word queer at this time is very much in the form of a slur. But if you see the queer characters in it only use it as an adjective. So he opens it with the opening line of the film is "You're not queer," and is he queer? It's an adjective. Whereas every time a non-queer character uses it, it's a noun. This person is a queer. Allerton says, "I'm not a queer." It's just a type, a thing that a person can be versus a distinct type of person. So I think that is sort of very. So I think Guadagnino is doing some really interesting things with the idea of queerness itself. Which is why I appreciate the specificities of it a lot.
Sure.
And I think that, again, while you can have a lot of universal emotions with it, it taps into that, that a queer person falling in love with a heterosexual person is like a welcoming sort of it's like a compulsory ritual.
Yeah.
As a queer person, if you are, to that struggle. I love this scene. So Jason Schwartzman's character is very much modeled around Ginsberg. They have this thing where he asks him, "Do you think he's queer?" And he goes, "You could just ask him, but like but he's like, "No, I won't." And another favorite scene is where he whispers, the word homosexual in this very emphatic way when he's talking to Allerton. But there's those specificities that make it resonate so deeply with me, and the entire thing, and the fact that then Guadagnino almost sort of convinces us instead of comforts us instead of Lee's character, sort of tortures him more by showing to us that it is, as he calls it, an asynchronous love story. That Allerton does feel for Lee, but is too afraid or not there yet or unable to come to terms with that. And the beauty is you have both things juxtaposed to each other. You have got a love story, but a love story that neither of them are willing to accept is a love story.
Sure.
And in that way, I think it just does it just and again, I know you have your issues with the sort of third act and on the whole the Yahe section of it, but I think for me it's the thing I said with Guadagnino in general, which is marrying the convention with the abstraction. Like, I'm not going into a Guadagnino film looking for like Poison level like abstraction, or looking for something like, even with something like Beau Travail and the sort of loose formal stuff that she does, that Denny does there. But it's that through a very conventional form, how using very conventionally amicable, not very like, not too out of the box sort of visuals and choreography, you're still able to express that that longing through very unconventional or seemingly unconventional.
Sure, I know, I get what you mean.
Next to conventional
Yeah.
kind of way. So that for me is I would say for me that the gist of what makes queer work for me, just on so many different levels. And like I said, it's not a perfect film, but that makes me like it even more. Like,
Yeah,
I
no,
think Call Me by Name is a better made film, but I think Queer just works for me a lot more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think what you are saying, I think the imperfections make it fascinating for me. I don't think I have a connect with it in a way. Again, I was thinking of a lot of movies while watching it. Of course, as I mentioned, Beau Travail less so in this case. But Querelle, of course, I told you to watch it after watching Queer, because of the artificiality of the production design, because of how demonstrably artificial it is, because of how much it feels like it's made up and it's not sort of, natural. And I think in many ways, the whole tension for the film, of the film for me, is about a person who's caught up in that artificiality in many ways, of not being able to accept even himself to some extent, and not being able to accept the other, and then but still then going out to seek a drug, essentially, or drug plant, whatever medicinal thing, which would form a intimate connection, like the one sort of spiritual connection. And I'm like, that fundamental contradiction I really like as a concept in the film. And I like how Guadagnino, especially in whenever the film is set in Mexico, creates this world where which I think is, again, maybe a little bit detrimental for me in terms of emotional distance, because I think I was, and so for me, Daniel Craig's performance also, by and large, kept that emotional distance. So I didn't sort of, cross the boundary of like, firstly, I don't relate to his character in any case. I'm not like, he's the extroverted person in any case, and he takes substances. Two things which are like major things which I don't do. So, I don't relate on those levels in any case. But but again, I don't think I need to relate to him in any sense. I can still be sympathetic towards him. In the same way, I don't relate to someone like Galoop in Beau Travail. But here, I think the performance has everything. I think is a little mannered. I think it's intentional, and I think in that sense, I was very much like at a distance, admiring the film for a lot of the things it was doing in terms of setting this film in, like, I think it was shot in Italy on like the Cinecittà set, or like studios or whatever. I was like, do more of like, people are so afraid of the unrealistic tag. I was like, I loved the fact that it felt like it was taking place in this artificial place. It of course supplemented or complemented the film's themes a lot also, but in that way you're also unburdening yourself from portraying a Mexico which is like authentic. It is supposed to be, which goes back to your sort of, Emilia Perez thing, but here it's also to do with this whole thing, which is why the Querelle thing came to me. The Because there's this Ships Ahoy, is it that place where I was like, surely he's taken stuff from Fassbinder here. Like, I'm like, come on, like there has to be some reference. He's not referenced him.
No,
I was
that is from the book.
That's
Shiv
from the
Savoy
book.
at least is
Okay.
a direct reference from the book.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. No, but I think it's just the whole idea that it is set on a studio-like set, which I think is it was appealing to me, and I was fascinated by how it was connecting with the story and how the identity crisis. Well, I don't think he's going through an identity crisis. I think he's just almost too afraid to look underneath him, like, look at himself in the mirror, in a sense, like, that sort of, and which is why I got reminded the most of Benediction by Terence Davies, and I was like, that, so to me the comparison struck there. So for you, if you're feeling it here, I was, whatever you feel here, I think the monumental wave of feeling I felt there, like when that film ends,
Yeah.
I was like, I saw it in the cinema, and I was like sitting there for the proper, and I was like, okay, wait, I need to, like, take this in, and how it sort of, has an impact on me. Here, I think the issue I have with the third act, and I think even the epilogue to some extent, is that the film then slips into that conventional space when actually everything up till then was quite idiosyncratic in a way, where I was like, oh, I like what you're doing with the artificiality of stuff and this, and then the imagery. He sort of, I thought the tropical stuff, the imagery of the, when they take the Yahe, I thought was terrible. Like, I thought whatever he did after that, like that whole sequence of that trance, I thought was really, really. It reminded me a bit of Bones and All in how churlish it seemed. Like the tone of it just felt off. Like it just felt like that's where I felt the most, where I thought the film really needed more time. Where I was like, if you allow that sequence to play out for about 20 minutes more, even, like, just allow the trance to sort of come in, as opposed to just like thrust it upon you. I thought, and this again goes back to Tropical Malady for me, like, because one whole part of that film is essentially set in a forest, and it becomes like a hunting mission between one person and the other. Like, it's that, how much are you willing to commit in terms of the desire bit also. Like, I think, because I think the point, especially with the Leslie Manville character, who dangerously closely veers to Mark Rylance territory, but I was glad she never, like, tipped over. I was like, I was worried. I was like, my God, one Leslie Manville performance I will not like. But no, she was quite impactful in the small role she has. But the whole idea, I think, because when she talks to the Drew Starkey character, Starkey, right?
Yeah.
Eugene Allerton character, when she
Allerton.
talks to him, she tells both of them actually that stay here to find out more about yourself, essentially, right? Is this whole thing that they need, that is that whole thing again, like, where it's like you want to form that telepathic connection, but you're not willing to commit yourself to actually like creating it. It's like a very counterintuitive thing, but that's what they feel. I mean, less so almost. I think Craig would have stayed if Allerton would have stayed. But it's that, I
Yeah.
think that's the moment where the film, I think, becomes very more sympathetic towards Lee than anything else. When Allerton just vanishes, I think it's when the film sort of becomes mellows down on Lee. Otherwise, he's pretty hard work almost throughout. I think there's a couple of moments when he's drunk and he says something which I think were like empathetic, but apart from that, I was just like, hard work. Like, he was like, which he should be. Like, that's the whole idea. Like, the whole idea is that he's not an easy character. He's uh hard to deal with, essentially, and he's confused, and he's, as you said in the book too, he loses his marbles. Here also he loses his marbles, but again in a very accelerated fashion, I think, where you can't just put one sequence of surrealism where he's looking into a set with his own like big eye, and then he's roaming around in corridors which are empty, and then, like, that's such a sub David Lynch image. I was just like, don't do it. Like, I'm there, and then it reminded me of Charlie Kaufman at points, like Synecdoche in New York, and I was just like, it just, there's no like, to me, the whole ending needs a much more time to just have an impact, at least on me. So yeah, I think my complaints about the ending are more on that. I'm still fascinated by the film, so I'm very curious to see if there is like an extended cut that ever releases. Because I'm sure that a lot of the issues I have will automatically get a little um, resolved because of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think yeah,
Yeah. So
mostly
a
those.
couple of things.
Mm,
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on. I thought was interesting,
mm,
and I'm very fascinated that I watched Querelle, and I said I had a comparison to make, and
mhm,
there's a moment, there's a throwaway dialogue in Querelle that reminded me of what is, I think, undoubtedly my favorite scene in Queer, which is
mm,
when Querelle's character is with Gilles, in that when he's
mhm,
sort of in exile,
mm.
and or he's hiding, and he's trying to tell him to on who to rob for money, and he says to rob the lieutenant,
Yeah.
and he says, oh, he's an old queen, and you
Mhm,
essentially realize, because you don't know the twist at the end yet, that Querelle knows
mhm,
what the lieutenant feels towards him,
mhm.
even though the lieutenant thinks that he doesn't know and therefore is sort of
Yeah.
enjoying his own fantasy.
Mhm,
It reminded me of the scene in Queer where after, so they go to South America, and
yeah.
they sleep together. The next morning, Daniel Craig still tries to sort of make a pass at Ireton's character while
Yes,
he's
yes,
eating.
yes. I've noted a dialogue also from there actually, but yes, yeah.
Yeah, and he
Mm.
steps away, and he has this sort of, that sort of a monologue as is in the book, and he's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're sick, why would you tell me about your afflictions, and
Mm-hmm.
very sort of dismiss, he sort of makes
Mm.
a play of what Allerton must be feeling
Yeah.
about Craig's character. And
Mm.
it's that sort of, again, it's those moments where uh what is worse than being loving someone and them not loving you back, is them knowing and then resenting you for the love that you feel
Yeah.
towards them,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they despise you for the imposition that you are, like,
Yeah.
how. And so that was one where at that moment where just
Yeah,
it
I think
connected to
that
me, and
scene,
it became
that
beautiful.
is one of the strongest scenes for me also, actually.
Mm,
That particular scene, because I've written down, and I think this is what sort of gave me the idea of the whole artificiality angle also, where I think
mm,
Craig says that, like maybe Allerton talks about the way Craig is talking or whatever, something, I think, and Craig
mm.
basically says it's just a routine for your amusement,
Yeah,
containing a
for your
modicum of
amusement.
truth, which I thought was very
Absolutely.
much indicative of the whole film. Like it has that almost, that like I think it feels like it's consistently wanting to, not the film is, but like the characters, like
Hmm.
a loudmouth essentially. He's like trying to, amuse you with his mannerisms and
Hmm.
everything on stories and all that. But within that, there's like that something that something that is unfulfilled, that something which wants to be
Hmm.
fulfilled but can't find the words to properly express it in many ways. So yeah, like
And
I
and,
love, this is
and I
my
think,
type of stuff, which I think is why I'm
hmm,
like, a little no, I'm not disappointed at it, because again, I thought it was fascinating. I wasn't bored ever while watching it. It's a longish movie.
hmm,
So I didn't think it was any of those things, but I'm like, this is very much my type of thing. I should like it
hmm.
more, I think, than I did. But anyways, that's
Yeah, and what I really like is he also again sort of draws the connection from there to the queerness itself, because I
mm,
think, if I'm not, I don't remember if he does, but I think Daniel Craig, I think, refers to himself as like a queen at some points, and a
yeah,
queen is, for those who don't know, a
yeah,
reference, essentially a term used for older gay men. So
hmm,
it's I think if you watch Love is the Devil, also there's a whole reference to it
sure,
there, and they often refer to each other with female. Men also refer to each
hmm,
other with female pronouns. But
hmm,
there again, when you compare it to a character like Duma, who is the sort of more explicitly sort of queer character, and he says this in his original discussion with Drew Straki's character as well, where he's like, it's a curse, it's an affliction,
yes.
it's I
I wanted
felt
to
I should
ask
have
you,
just.
I wanted to ask you this actually.
Hmm,
What is the, and I don't because this is such a common theme in so many queer films,
hmm.
and I think this sort of, I was reading the Foucault, how do you pronounce his name?
Foucault.
Foucault, like
Foucault.
as in like, okay,
Yes, that's
as
the
like
running joke
cigarette.
in
Okay, okay.
yes. Not just cigarettes. Again, we're talking about stuff other than cigarettes here. So this is a
you
very
don't take substances, I don't take substances. तो मेरे दिमाग में फिर सब सिगरेट ही आएगा ना सबसे पहले, और क्या फूकते हैं लोग. I mean, I'm sure कुछ और
Queerness.
भी फूकते हैं, but whatever. My point is, yeah, there's this whole thing about self-hatred, which is maybe another reason why I connect to queer cinema, just saying. But yeah, it's the whole sort of self-hatred, or like this whole thing where queerness itself is, well, of course it was, because it was criminalized for so long also, and then because it was, is it more like an internalized thing where it feels like a burden which needs to you need to bear with, almost, as opposed to, you know again, yeah, I don't know, like in so many of the queer artists who've made work about it, of course, someone will make about, at the time of the AIDS epidemic, and I think that was the new queer cinema movement at that time.
Yeah.
That is very specific to, stuff that was happening at that time also. But the more I've seen, like, stuff from even Visconti, you saw Death in Venice, which part has slightly some resonances with queer in how the dynamic between staring and, this whole thing about, well, that extends not just to queerness, to pedophilia also, but
Yes.
more troubling film. But we can talk about it sometime, I'm sure, with our fellow PPP members. But no, but yeah, what is the self-hatred angle
I
of it
think,
all?
yeah, I think the fundamental conception here I have to understand is, and I'm going to talk a little bit of theory, so don't
Yeah,
mind
yeah.
me, is the idea of normativity. And I think that is the fundamental struggle. Like, everybody fundamentally wants to be, in a lot of ways, normal. Like,
Yeah.
everybody wants to be unique, but you still there is a desire to fit within convention. And queerness is, and Foucault talks about this extensively, but in a way, when he writes History of Sexuality, he's very much looking almost as from a level of sort of homosexuality, where it's heterosexuality is always threatened by homosexuality. That
Sure.
it's an order that can be broken by this. Where you
Sure.
see something like, even when we talked about something like beau travail
Yeah.
and homosociality and homoeroticism and all those things. So homosexuality has always been, in that sense, treated as an aberration, as
Sure.
a sort of, and again, when you read something like what Foucault's writing, it's put in the same category as pedophilia and
Yeah.
other sort of, even this happens to others. So the word that you were confused about, hermaphrodism, is reference to intersex individuals,
Sure.
which comes from the Greek term hermaphrodite, which is the combination of Hermes and Aphrodite, and now
Okay.
not considered a very appropriate term to use, but you use the diversity in sexual development, or
Sure.
intersex. It's even these, what we now consider very quote unquote normal people, were also clubbed with what even still today we consider abnormal paraphilias and pedophilias and all these things. So it's very much that queerness is in a way a disease, and it was treated like that. It's pathologized as an illness, as a disease, and so it's the self-loathing is almost it's a rite of passage. It's something that you hate. I mean, and it's also the thing, like, you spend your entire life loving people who will not love you back and probably despise you, like I said, for the fact that you love them. So in your love itself, it's laced with a level of hatred. So that is it's a common thing that that filmmakers keep pulling on, because it is that homosexuality, again, what Foucault says, exists has to have the concept of homosexuality. You need a society.
Yeah.
Men loving in every species, you have got homosexuality in the sort of, in that literal sense of male members of the species who have romantic and or sexual, or at least bondings with other male members of the species.
Yep.
But it's in a human society that we turn it into a thing, a type of person, an affliction, so on and so forth. So what Foucault says is the homosexual was born in the late 18th century, or till late 19th century, I think he says. Till then, it was a sodomite. You were someone who you're a man who had sex with men and you didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
But then in the late 19th century, it becomes a thing that you have to talk about to acknowledge it as an aberration.
Yeah.
So that is why at every level, so that's why you see AIDS epidemic art is in a lot of ways similar but different to something that would be made in the post-war era, to then something that would be made in the middle of these eras. Then, when we were talking about like our queer noir thing, and I was paralleling it with the different movements in
actually,
the
that's
rights
a good
movement.
point. Queer, because there were elements of queer, especially when it was set in Mexico, that did remind me of noir, especially the way, the design of it, and the way the shadows sort of overwhelm Mexico. Even though queer's Mexico is very much more of a utopian, created artificial utopian space, but an artificial utopian space nonetheless, right? So I think that,
which is quite funny because the prologue, or actually the introduction or preface to Queer is essentially Burroughs being extremely racist about Mexico and calling it all sorts of, and it's not even in the voice of Lee, it's in his own voice, talking about what a hellhole it was, and very like Orientalist, like 18th century
Jacques
Orientalist
Audiard.
descriptions. I'm going to say worse. Like you're talking about a man in the 1950s, a white man in the 1950s.
I had to get that in. That's the only.
True.
Yeah.
In today's that sort of art is about transness. So you see something like I Saw the TV Glow, or like Jane Schoenberg's work, or it's constantly that queer art comes out very much out of that feeling of true othering, that I am not normal, and non-normative, and a part of queer liberation, as we said, is to get rid of the idea of normal itself. That you can only be an other if you have a normal that you are othered from. So that is why this is a sort of common theme. And again, so I want to move into a certain the point about the Yahe, which then I think will lead us nicely into the discourse part, is this idea of the Yahe itself. So you talk about spiritual connection, he talks about telepathy, but where it becomes really interestingly troubling, and I quite adore it, is when he talks about it, and it's a throwaway line in the film, but it's a part of the book, is that the armies, that Russia and the CIA are researching it into it in order to make slaves or mind control soldiers. It's very much from telepathy, it is going into mind control. So even though in the film,
in 50s mein aata hai na
about
mind control. I think during the Korean War, I think it was more of a thing. Yeah.
So it goes from, obviously, again, fantastic dialogue. I want to talk to you without speaking is the sort of the sweeter version of it. But there is also this thing where Daniel Craig wishes, and it's there in the book. There's a lot of resentment that even that Lee feels towards Allerton, because how much he makes him hate himself by showing that he's uncomfortable sometimes with the passes that he's making at him. Like he feels disgust at Allerton's existent or non-existent, or his perceived disgust response. So it's almost like, I want to do this so that I can deal with I'm not queer, I'm disembodied. I can have a relationship with you without it being called a queer relationship. And so in that sense, and why it sort of leads into the discourse, is again one of the things around these two films is this idea of predation. And in that, I sort of wrote down 3 points that essentially I think we could go through. I think it would be nice. One is obviously, which I mentioned with Call Me By Your Name itself, this idea of queer history and the undemocratic nature of queer relationships. One was depiction versus endorsement, because this has been annoying the living hell out of me, about the idea that just because you show something means that, and again, whole Nora discourse we spoke about earlier.
We've spoken about it, which will release in the very soon. Let's just say that,
yeah. So that, and the third thing was this. So I did a course in feminist aesthetics in my undergrad, and this concept of the burden of representation, that when you're a queer filmmaker or representing a community, you have to be extremely careful about what you show, because then it gets weaponized against the community and things like that. So those are the sort of 3 things that I wanted to sort of touch upon. I'll start off with one of them, and you can sort of obviously chip in, because so for me, this is the first, I think the fundamental problem here is, and I'm going to be very angry and mad at young queer people, because it's it's like how you guys bitch about media literacy. This is my equivalent of that with like gay history, because unfortunately the queer rights movement has gotten churned through heteronormativity, and this is something we talked about again when we spoke about the representation cinema in Hindi, and I was talking
Yes.
about Professor R. Raj Rao's
Yes.
work
Yes.
in sort
Mhm.
of around Article 377. But it's that, oh, we need queer narratives to fit in heteronormative moral
Sure.
normative conventions.
Yeah.
And then when you don't do that, you're giving a bad name, or you are harming the community. And I think it's a very misguided thing, because the fact of the matter is, what we're talking about, queer people don't get to be in quote unquote normal relationships. Maybe
Yeah.
in the US or in Western countries where queerness is more accepted, or you've got
Mhm.
recognition of queer rights or
As
whatever,
of yet,
which also doesn't happen
unfortunately.
as
Yeah,
of
I was about
as
to
of
say.
yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, but especially in older contexts and in countries like India, like other places, this is very much this is our normal.
Yeah.
Our normal is to reference a film that you love. We have what is called May December relationships, where you have got a significant age gap, because that is the only way that you're able to build a connection. You have this whole thing of like an older queer person guiding younger queer people through the community and stuff like that. So I find it very troubling,
Sure.
essentially, the way that the discourse has panned out, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I mean, it's again, I think it also sort of speaks to, because again, I think I'm also going to respond more to any form of cinema which would rather not fit the conventions. Why would it need to? I think if you're going to champion individuality, then you can't sort of stamp out stuff which is attempting to transgress. Of course, you can critique it. There's no problem with critiquing it. It's just, if you're going to take that limited point of view where you're just going to keep on saying that we need to fit it into that one category, I'm like, then what is the point of cinema? Like, then it's like processed art, right? Isn't it? Then it's which it is in many cases nowadays. Like, it's that studio processed art. Like, it's essentially people making reels, like of stuff which are saleable. We saw that last year with something like, I know it's a very different film, but like Bad News. I'm like, is this like a joke? Like, is this? I mean, well, it isn't, because it wasn't funny at all. But like, it's like, what
The joke was on us.
the joke was on us, yeah, but definitely on me, because anyways, but no, I think it was the whole thing where, yeah, this argument, I find it limiting. I think there's an intersection between this and media literacy, both actually, because it's not mutually exclusive. I think it's this whole thing where, you know, people will get a heart attack if they see Todd Haynes' Poison, then considering what it is about. Like, the way it's doing the transgressive stuff is like, legitimately people will like revolt or something. And your revolt can be meaningful, but like, you can't advocate for cinema which just fits for the sake of representation. If we are going to do that, then it's just going to, you'll get like one type of thing again and again and again. Why would you want that? You have Marvel for that, right? You have like universes for that, essentially, where you kind of get like this homogenized thing. I'm like, but why? Like, let filmmakers and it's not even transgressive. It's actually, in the case of sort of queer history, if it is already predicated on age gap relationships and everything, then there's no need to, and I think there's this whole thing, right? I remember, I know it's a very different example, but I remember, because we are fans of this film, Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna, right? I think it's this whole thing where, like, why don't these characters get punished? I'm like, it's not your decision, It's not like some state law is being passed ki these people deserve to be punished or not. It's a simple case of people, like, it's in fact challenging when you make films in which we go back to that. मेरा तो वही point बार बार आ जाता है, to be very honest. It's like, अगर आपको picture वो देखनी है, or if you want to watch a movie in which whatever is getting reinforced, then don't watch art cinema. Honestly, like, you won't discover anything. Like, it's my mystery. It's the whole mystery thing. Like, the mystery of, like, the art is mystery, essentially. what you are finding out, or you're discovering through it, right? You don't just want to re-emphasize what you know. If that is the point, then make like sermons. Like, why are you like watching movies, or like movies which are quote unquote troubling or whatever, quote unquote, whatever. Like, you can't. Like Emilia Perez, we can take something like that even as an example. That's not transgressive. We are critiquing it on multiple levels. It's not that it can't be transgressive. It's badly transgressive. That can also be the case, and it's badly made also, which is also the case. Like wo to, like it's the whole her level pe, it's misguided and failed. So it's easier to critique a movie like that. I'm trying to think of a movie which sort of has a lopsided sort of things where the filmmaking is good, but I would say Nosferatu, but then the filmmaking makes me sleep. So no. Then I'm trying to think.
I know
Can
for
you
me,
think?
I know you haven't seen it, but for me, that example is Boys Don't Cry, which I mentioned last time.
Sure.
Yeah.
The
No,
Hillary
but
with
in that
Hilary
sense,
Swank, right?
Hillary Swank, yeah. I find the Kank comparison quite fitting because
Hmm.
it's another film that I get mad about a lot because
Yeah.
I watch like occasionally watch like like Indian film YouTube, which is another whole can of worms. And
This is again your
which
fault.
we so I mean I found you guys from there, so you guys are also
Your
part of
fault.
that.
Yeah, your fault. That's what I'm saying. किसके साथ फंस like और तो किसी को मिले नहीं हम लोग, so you only found us. So it's more like that. No, if we were like a
So
big channel who was like we had like whatever, we got reach from YouTube, there would be different. But you are the one who reached us the most, so it's clearly you who were like, it's that opposite thing that's happened here. Anyway.
you are the final manifestation of my masochism,
Yes,
essentially.
yes. I think we are. I mean, I would think we are better than Indian YouTube, but again, I hold no such standards. I am 100% sure we've stooped to that level also.
I mean, also see also three live stream.
Yeah, there's a reason why we don't do those live streams that much anymore. Even though we will be doing
Um,
month-end live streams. So anyways,
yeah. So one of those YouTubers was doing a retrospective on Kabhi Aapne Na Kehna,
yeah.
and they were like, the film has got issues. I mean, I
Yeah.
love the film, but there is
Hmm.
no denying the film has got issues.
Hmm.
But their fundamental conclusion was that it's a nice film, despite the fact that the characters don't get punished. They have a happy ending, and that it endorses cheating. And I took a moment, and I was like, again, which brings us to the point of depiction versus endorsement. Like,
Yes.
I don't know, I have to say this out loud, but a film showing something is not the same as the film endorsing
I mean,
said
I
thing.
would, okay, I'd even say Kank endorses. There's a bracket. It's not like कि आप जाओ और infidelity करते रहो. ऐसा नहीं है. Like उसको
Huh.
context में तो डालो picture की. It's
I
about
think
desire.
it
It's about
humanizes that
desire
sort
and
of
connection. It's
taboo
about
desire.
people who don't find desire and connection in their marriage, finding
Hmm.
it after marriage, and then mature people.
Hmm.
Wow, shocking. Mature people coming to forgive them after whatever
Hmm.
a certain point of time after they readjust their lives. Like
Hmm.
that's not, you don't need your cinema doesn't need to be that vindictive. When it can be
Hmm.
empathetic also. Can we please accept that? It can be
Hmm.
vindictive when it needs to be. No one's denying that. I mean,
Hmm.
there's power in films being fiercely against stuff and everything, but his
Hmm.
cinema has always been, I think, I mean, I don't know how we've gotten to, of course, we have gotten to Karan Johar at some point in time. I mean, it's queer cinema in any case, right? So I suppose
Hmm.
it crosses boundaries in his case also. But no, but his cinema's always been about people doing stuff out of bounds in many ways, like like
Hmm.
transgressing what the bounds are. In certain, it's even in his traditionalist films like Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum,
Kabhi
where
Gum.
um, adopted son marries, like it's the class barrier there, I think.
Hmm.
It's also the It's also actually, yeah, it's good. I mean, anyways, we've talked about him a lot. I want to start repeating. Anyways, the point what is being made is linked to what Chris is saying, though. It's this whole thing where don't force a film to adhere to your morals. See
Yeah,
it
and
in
I
terms of morals.
don't
क्या
like
है?
this
Like I think
idea.
queerness में तो I think you
Huh.
said ना कि morals ही like it if it's built on such principles, like if the history of it has been so tumultuous, right? Then there's no
Hmm.
need to make it like vanilla, I guess, right? Like that's the Love Simon approach, or uh,
Yeah.
or whatever
The
Netflix nonsense
Heartstopper
you watched.
approach.
What was
Yeah.
the Netflix garbage
Which
you
one?
watched? Which one? You watched the whole Netflix slate of Hindi films. Are you said no? It was
Yeah.
garbage. This with T2, not Sonu or whoever was that
अरे वो
actor.
अमर प्रेम की प्रेम कहानी, that
Yes,
wasn't
yes.
even Netflix, that was like Z5 or something.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Netflix. Never mind.
Oh,
You
that
said,
that
no?
is that is another gem.
Gem as in
Highly
like,
recommend
okay.
on your
As in
if you want to like have a
जो
drinking
दांत तोड़
game.
देता है that type का वो gem. हाँ.
With Aditya Seal and Tito, which is one hell of a pairing. Highly recommend. But yeah, no, I think again, philosophy student take. When you look at morality in such a, we open one of the first courses you get is moral philosophy. You open with
Yeah.
fundamentally breaking down this notion of what does morality mean, and you realize it's such an arbitrary sort of notion unless you believe in the divine or whatever.
सबको
From
डेकलॉग
a
दिखाना
sort of
चाहिए essentially.
so it's such a fundament, and so I also hate this idea that films need to be arbiters of morality. Like they have to have a very distinct, like I remember this happened to me and I found it to be rather surprising. So I recently a couple of months back watched Kubrick's Lolita, which happens to be which I had kind of mixed opinions on, and I'm someone who loves the book. The book is one of
Mhm.
my all-time favorites, and I had issues with Lolita, but the problem wasn't that I thought the film endorsed what
Mhm.
Humbert was doing. I thought the depiction had some issues with it, but
Mhm.
I had watched a video essay on the film months before, a long time before I actually watched the film, because
Mhm.
I do that sometimes. And
Mhm.
in that, it was very much the person was condemning Kubrick for not condemning what Humbert is doing, and I'm
What do
like,
you
then
mean
have
not
you?
condemning it? He gets shot. What
And
do you
I'm like,
want?
then I saw it afterwards, and I'm like, do you know how to watch movies?
What do you mean he's not
I was
condemning it?
very
He's literally the loser throughout the whole movie. You said that's the difference from the novel also, right? Like it's there's a more
yeah.
thorny thing going on in the novel, whereas
Yeah, the
in
the the
in,
no
in
the
this
film makes it so much more farcical. Like he's a
farcical, yeah.
joke
Yeah,
in
he is a
the
loser, like a joke of a character. That's it. What do you mean not punish him? क्या चाहते क्या हो भाई? Like क्या he got shot in the end. What else do you want? He lived a lonely existence and got shot. What do you want him to get castrated? Then you have other films for that. Uh, I mean,
so in that sense, so I just cannot
that's
stand with that idea.
then they should be fine with Death in Venice. That the features like a proper
Uh,
miserable death scene at the end. Miserable as in like so good also. It's like so good as in like it's
oh,
so
fantastic.
moving. I was like, that's how you like capture someone losing their life. It's so moving and evocative in just how someone loses their life. But anyways, yeah.
Yeah, so I just I find it very odd. Like you can have criticisms of a film, but to dismiss it wholesale, like again, that's what makes me very annoyed. Like every time a Call Me by Name post goes viral, it gets quoted with, "Do you guys know this film is about predation?" Or like nobody knows that this film is about endorsing relationships between adults and minors. And I'm like, I mean, if you want, like, what was that horrible Jennifer Lopez film that came out about not Jennifer Lopez, sorry, Jennifer Lawrence film that came out about
Oh, no hard feelings. It was so
no
bad.
hard feel. You want to talk about predation and odd age dynamics? Critique something like that.
Hey,
Like
we mentioned like there's this whole discourse that happened even with
Licorice Pizza, right?
Licorice
Is
Pizza,
it?
which I love. I love the movie.
Yes.
I don't that whatever that makes me, I suppose. But yeah, like it's just go up. I'm like, which is ironically what the people in Licorice Pizza don't do, and have a romance when one is a kid and one is. I'm like,
Yeah.
you think those things don't happen in real life or what? Like, do you think people won't like talk about these things? And I don't know. It's just like, to me, it's weird. It's like almost like a taking a scientific approach to art. I'm like, the science में जाओ ना फिर art में क्या कर रहे हो? I'm not saying every piece of art needs to be, provocative and troubling, but Licorice Pizza is doing it, I think, quite smartly. I to think the romance is like amazing. I think Paul Thomas Anderson in general is a fantastic filmmaker. But yeah, I mean, it's everything can't be a means of promotion or anything. It's about also it's that's the other thing I was looking at. I think someone had mentioned it. Sometimes the leap people make from individuals to communities is also a different thing, right? Is that whole thing where
Yeah.
portraying an individual is not equal to sometimes portraying, like, of course, sometimes actually when we talk about, and I think this is where Emilia Perez becomes troubling, because it is playing at such a broad level where it sort of stands on like a symbolic level as opposed to an individual level, right? It's not like, it doesn't feel like it's about an individual, it feels like it's about a community and all that. Licorice Pizza, I would argue, is not about a community. I would argue it's about two people, and those two people and how society around them is for me, it's actually much thornier than people see it. For me, it's like about how that woman in society is essentially passed around passed around three men, essentially, all of whom are slime balls of some sorts, and she ends up or has to end up choosing the least slimiest ball of all of them. So it's to me, it's almost like this whole thing where the magical romance itself is very corroded in some senses. Their magical, dreamy romance itself is very corroded,
Yeah.
and it's very taking place in that insular bubble, essentially. So it's about all those things. I don't understand why people are not. Oh my God, this has become that usual session of being very angry at people. But this you started, so I'm not even taking the blame for this. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't want to say grow up because then I don't know.
No, as we
Just
say, as
stop
Gen Z
taking.
say, touch grass.
अब मैं नहीं करता उतना, so I can't say that to people. But I don't know. It's just so frustrating sometimes to look at discourse on
Yeah.
films. Like, it's films themselves nowadays sometimes are frustrating. I'm not being the oh pehle bahut achhi hoti thi types, but I think just particular this year, last year has been a bit iffy. Bollywood is just down the toilet, so that is frustrating. I will admit, especially as someone, I think two, three people in Quid especially have always championed Bollywood. So yeah, that is definitely disappointing. But now, when like you have this wide range of cinema with so many topics and so many possibilities, if you want to, what you want to do is fit it in your own sort of box. I'm just like, then what's the point? इसीलिए लार्ज वॉन
Yeah.
ट्रियर को इतनी गालियां मिलती हैं. I mean, to be honest, he does deserve it sometimes. I'm not denying that. He pushes the provocative boundaries to really uncomfortable levels. You've not seen Lars von Trier stuff, right?
I've
Next.
seen Nymphomania. That's the only thing I've seen.
Okay. No, you should see his other stuff also. Dogville, I
Yeah.
think you love, but
Hmm.
Antichrist
मेरे
is
कोर्स में
a landmine, absolute landmine. Like, I mean, it's so, it's like people will like tear each other's hair over that film. It's that sort of film. But I'm like, बनाओ ऐसी picture है, at least कोई तो फायदा हो. Like, it's like, morally थोड़ी troubling होती है. Of course, I think that's a good example actually. If you there's a way of reading that film which is very morally troubling, and it's extremely misogynistic. If one chooses to read that film in that particular way, there are two ways, I think, in which you can read the film. You read it in that way, in which I choose to not. It is extremely misogynistic. Otherwise, it's critiquing misogyny extremely. Like, so it's like it's the two sides. But I'm like, at least it gives you like the chance to think about it. I'm like, otherwise, kahan tum log love Simon जो भी कचरा देखोगे उसमें कहाँ कुछ सोचने को मिलेगा. But anyway,
Yeah.
any
Yeah,
your other
the last thing
points?
that
Yes,
yeah, last point only. Okay,
I
we,
might
we
cut
got
some
through
of
it.
this out, but anyways,
No, please do.
okay.
I anyway rambled. I told you this is a therapy session. It's your job to then curate all of this into
I have
something
three
listenable.
episodes which I have to edit. Three episodes which I have to edit still. Okay, so I have
Yeah.
a lot of
Best
work
of
in the
luck
next
only.
week. Yeah, one of them is a three
Yeah.
hour,
So
30-minute one. So yes,
oh, this best of wala.
best
Which
of,
one is? No.
best of,
Uh,
best of. Yeah.
so no, the point that you brought up only the particular to generalization wala point, and I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned this that to me Challengers is coming back to Guadagnino in a sense. Challengers is a film where I think you can draw some very interesting generalizations
Yeah.
about Guadagnino's critique of heteronormativity, of monogamy,
Hmm.
of the societal attitudes around polyamory. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it's about a threesome, but I think that
Hmm.
it says a lot more, in my opinion,
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
this and again, the idea of like metaphors, right? The beauty of a
Hmm.
metaphor is you've got room to interpret and sort of say
Hmm.
so through the metaphor of tennis. He's able to say so much. But to me, Call Me by Your Name, and that's what troubled me the most. Call Me by Your Name and Queer are very particular stories. I mean,
Hmm.
Queer is literally an almost like a
Subjective,
biographical
right? Almost. Yeah.
story of this guy. And I don't like the fact that you're then drawing sweeping on both ends. Obviously there's the
Mm-hmm.
conservative impulse to draw sweeping claims about, oh, all gay people are like this,
Yeah.
but you should not be doing that job for, as a progressive, you shouldn't be doing
Yeah.
that job for them, no, by saying that, oh, these people will draw this kind of comparison, so I am only doing it, sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It's that and again, it's a notion of this burden of representation that you should not. And I think that in that sense, I admire people like Haynes and all, but
Hmm.
but the reason why I think Guadagnino particularly works for me is he's doing this in the mainstream, where
Hmm.
very much he is not letting himself, in certain senses, be restrained by the fact that, oh, because I'm a gay filmmaker making
Yeah.
gay films at a time where they're not accepted, that I will neuter my work in order to
Yes.
appeal to. I think he does that from, you can say that he does that from a filmmaking perspective,
Yeah.
but I don't think he does that from a subject matter perspective.
No, he
because
doesn't.
I do
Even
think
filmmaking is like, again, it's bordering. I think it's the like got flashback of border after this. Cursed only. I mean, Bollywood has genuinely made any conversation that you have on films to be not taken seriously, essentially, because then you get reminded of some mushkil that a film gave you when you were watching it. Oh God.
Edil,
I know.
but yeah, so in that sense, to me, I hate the fact that queer audiences are doing that,
Yeah.
and instead they are championing, and I'm going to say it, absolute slop, like Wicked. And I say this
Wicked is
as
a queer
as
film?
a it's considered, I mean, GLAD has nominated it as part of its
Okay.
its musical theater is deeply associated with queer culture,
Because
and
of the
also Wicked is a
campiness
highly
and sort of that.
campiness and sort of performativity, and also
Sure.
it's a very queer red film because of the dynamic between Cynthia Erivo and
Sure. Ariana Grande.
Ariana Grande's character.
Yeah.
But they are championing, I'm telling you, I have genuinely never seen, like, not seen this much incompetent filmmaking in such a big film in a long time. Like,
I'm
can you
just
imagine?
waiting for me to watch it and like it. No.
No, I will have words to say to you, my friend. But can you imagine shooting a dance sequence in a large hall where you've got someone like Jonathan Bailey, who used to be the favorite of Stephen Sondheim? Like, imagine Stephen Sondheim's favorite
Yeah.
is dancing, and you've got these huge circular windows that are backlit like crazy to the point where you cannot see Jonathan Bailey dancing in the foreground. And I am like, and then getting nominated for a visual effects Oscar, which is another level of, I have a lot of
That
stuff to
and
say.
Emilia Perez have taken the awards by storm or whatever.
No, but at least
Sandstorm.
everybody hates Emilia Perez. That is one thing I do
Well,
appreciate.
everybody except, yeah.
I'm talking about the gay community. I mean, everybody in the gay community.
So you're saying queer people themselves like Wicked?
They like Wicked, and they
Huh.
don't like Emilia Perez. I get you. You are right. Your critiques are very valid. I'm with you. But why every big person I see loving Wicked are gay people, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, just you can't handle Call Me by Your Name. Like, itna bhi tumse, and if you see it, like, in the largest, you're like, again, it's a disrespect of queer history and from the filmmaking perspective. Like, you should be, I'm not saying you can tolerate, but when you are someone like John Waters, like I watched Pink Flamingo, genuinely one of the
I
most
don't think
uncomfortable
but
views
I don't think John Watt is a good example to give right now, considering what his favorite film is of this, of the past year.
of yeah, but I'm still saying, after what John Waters has made,
Yeah.
you are like, this is what is gay cinema of 2024, what is pioneering us is Wicked. And then
Yeah,
and to again,
but Chris, John Waters movies will never get nominated for Oscars. No, you also think about that.
my critique is not of this is the misconception that I'm not critiquing the Oscars. I think Oscars is
Okay.
emblematic of the issue. My problem is with the gay community. My problem is with young Twitter queers, and this has been my lifelong, like, the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place is for the last 3 years I have been peeved by young Twitter queers making a nonsense about call me by your name. So that is my moral stand is coming from there. I don't care about the Oscars, but I think they're emblematic of really troubling trends in
They are.
queer
Yeah,
cinema and
yeah,
representation
they
and all
are.
of that, especially in a time that's so commercialized and
Yeah.
you're getting less opportunities. I mean, in a lot of ways more, but in a lot of ways also less opportunities for independent cinema, for smaller voices. And in that way, when this is what is being championed, and I think Emilia Paris particularly, when you see how
I forgot.
actively harmful it
I've
is.
stopped keeping the counter of how many times he mentioned it now. But anyways.
I'll you should send me the unedited this thing. I will, for the teaser for Twitter, I will make like a physical counter that says
Of
every
Emilia
time.
Perez.
It will be a super cut of all the
I'll
moments.
send it
But
to you.
yeah. So that's, so I am going to stop before this gets out of control. But yes, I really wish that people would not put that burden on filmmakers that you have to make queer cinema that abides by our whatever, like, extremely heteronormativized notions of sexuality. Like, I would much rather take queer filmmakers making extremely uncomfortable films, almost borderline immoral or even immoral, by convention immoral films, and pushing the envelope, than having commercial slop be served to us every year.
On that note, I'm going to put a Wicked song.
No. I'll give you the good one. Play the Jonathan Bailey one. That song I actually like.
No, you think I'm going to put a Wicked song where I have the option of putting lavaginoplastia?
No, you should put Me Camino. You like that song.
Yeah, but this
Or
is not
put Elmar.
you're making it sound like Me Camino. I legitimately listened to it once or twice one day after I had watched the movie. I'm not listening to it.
You said it. I am just quoting what you said in our
Yeah, but I
chat.
also then said this, that I'm not listening to it again after that.
I certainly have lost
Anyways,
the ability to
I
read.
don't mind that song anyways. I think that's one of the decent songs in the
No,
film.
you can put love. I'll tell you the particular clip I want you to put of lavaginoplastia. Just put that. But also we have to get Amartya to live react to it again. That was
He will do that.
sincere comedy gold.
He will do that, I
Yes.
think. He'll be happy to do that. Anyways, thank you so much for listening to this episode. Again, lots covered, I think, in terms of Guadagnino's films, of course. And I think we are pronouncing his surname correctly.
It's Guadagnino, I think.
Is it Guadagnino? Okay.
It's not Spanish, it's Italian.
Italian, yeah. But yeah, I mean, lots talked about him, of course, but then lots also talked about just queer cinema now, I suppose, and the discourse around it. Which, if you want, like, now it's like a trifecta. No, 4 episodes essentially on this topic, because we did 3 before, right? One on Beau Travail, and then 2 on Bollywood cinema and queer representation. So if you want 4 into 2, so 8 hours of discussion on queer cinema today, or nowadays, then please listen to all 4 of these episodes, including this one. Let us know what you thought about it. Let us know what you think about Luca's films. if you agree with Chris more or if you agree with me more. I think I know the answer where this will go to. But anyways, thank you so much for listening, and you can follow Chris at PRDS Chris on
Yes.
Instagram and LimJ7
Yes.
on
Well done.
Twitter. And you can follow me at Terminal Cinema on Instagram. Don't follow me on
And follow
Twitter.
us on
Uh,
at QID podcast on Twitter, where I run a clown show essentially, because
yeah.
I know that the Instagram doesn't get as much nonsense on it because it's much more curated. So I take out
No,
all
no, but
the
I
chat
we've been
screenshots and
I've been very lazy with other stuff. No, I won't say lazy, but I've just not been in that zone of like doing all the posts and all that stuff. But I we'll get back to it. Don't so just we'll put it out
तो यार
both
का तो
on.
I'll probably end up making a post itself, तो
Sure,
उसको तो आप repost
perfect,
कर लेना. We'll
perfect,
count that
perfect,
as.
perfect, perfect. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We'll do that. Anyways, thank you
Hmm.
and khatam.